James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to a more civilized podcast. This is the podcast you're looking for. You may not go about your business. Stay here, listen, and then move along.
Hey everybody, we are here yet again, helping Chris recover from the trauma that Subnautica has given him.
Oh my word! It's a wonderful game. If you have the chance to play it, pick it up. And if you discover, like me, that you have an absolute phobia of the ocean and underwater in general, that you had never realized, then my sympathies, and I understand.
Well, and Subnautica is not a horror game, but all the rest of us that don't have that same phobia like Chris, it's still terrifying.
Yeah, it's scary for everybody. For me, it is crippling.
So, I'm Kyler.
I'm Chris.
I'm Ross.
I promise I know how to do a podcast, guys. I know how to introduce us, I swear.
Nah, no worries.
My brain is full of Cafe Rio nachos. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Ross, you've got some announcements.
Yes. Couple quick exciting announcements.
They are exciting.
The first is that Disney has announced that they are not going to make Star Wars movies that debut only on Disney Plus. So we won't have to worry about we don't have to worry about like the rumored they're going to be trying to hedge all of the fans towards their service. They are actually going to be nice enough to hurt the rest of us.
But did you read the article?
I didn't get a chance to.
Okay, yeah. So I read it. I'm like, well, that's interesting, and it's a money issue. If they had the money, they would do it.
Really?
Yeah. Bob Iger said our movies cost over $100 million to make. We'll never make that money back on just our service, so we're not going to do it just there.
That's true.
So if they could somehow wrangle all of us into paying for their service, they would do it there. But since they'll never make their money back, that's why.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder how long that will be the case, though. Because, I mean, the landscape of TV and movies, it's all changing as far as how we consume.
It is, yeah. Well, and the quality is getting better. You look at, like, Game of Thrones, or, by the way, I'm just going to make a plug for this. The Last Kingdom on Netflix is fantastic. I'm a medieval historian, so I went into it with a highly skeptical eye, because most historical, quote-unquote, shows, particularly for the Middle Ages, are terribly, woefully inaccurate. And I was shocked at how accurate they kept it. So go watch that show. But regardless, it has really great quality. Not quite Game of Thrones, but almost. Right. It's really good.
Well, but even like Netflix, all of their standalones. I mean, Stranger Things is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so I mean,
the Marvel, the Daredevil, and all those before they were all summarily canned were really high quality. And
So yeah, even TV is kind of taking it up a notch, which is good for the consumer.
Definitely. But I mean, but again, as I was saying, is it's at some point we all are going to subscribe, and that's basically going to be it.
Oh, I hate to give companies more money than I think they deserve, and definitely Disney has all the money and then some that they deserve, so I don't want to give them any more. But at the same time, I'm going, well, you're releasing exclusive Star Wars content on this platform. Well, there goes however much a month.
Well, and I mean, even if it weren't, if they've got enough good content to justify the price, I could do that. Right now, when you look at Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, I only have Netflix. And honestly, right now, that's because I'm not paying for that. That's my brother-in-law. We had Amazon Prime.
Don't judge, Chris. You all know you mooch.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, we weren't going to. They offered
it.
We had a delightful time where we were like, well, we've been feeling bad for mooching, and I logged on, and it told us, oh, hey, your password, your payment has expired, because his credit card had expired. So we just switched it over to ours while he wasn't looking. Because we were just like, we'll pay him back a little bit here. And so we managed that for a couple of months before they noticed and switched it back. But so it was fun.
Speaking of paying things back and whatever, for years and years and years and years and years have been just ripping off my sister's Netflix. And when we lived in Michigan, we gave her our TV info so that her husband could watch like BYU football online. But you needed the to prove that you were paying for cable or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So we did that, and then after we moved, didn't have that anymore, obviously, and so we've been mooching for free for a couple of years. So I told her, I'm like, look, Disney's coming out with this new thing that's going to have all their stuff on it. I'm getting it because they're putting Star Wars stuff on there. The repayment will begin.
Yeah.
I will give you my login info. You and your kids can watch whatever you want.
Well, and
we
tried to. For a while, we had Amazon Prime for a year there.
Oh, yeah.
And so I told my brother-in-law and my sister, and it's just like, hey, here's our login info. Come, use our Amazon Prime. They never did. And granted, that was at a time where Amazon Prime wasn't quite as useful.
And even
nice
still,
as
there's only a handful of things usually at a time on Amazon that are really worth it.
Yeah, well, Wheel of Time's going to be on Amazon.
It's true. I know, that's why I'm so excited.
When is that coming, by the way?
We don't know yet. Yeah, it's still in the early processing stages, but it is going to be there eventually. And if you think for a second that my wife isn't going to make us shell out the money for that Lord of the Rings show.
That's right.
that is definitely a thing that we're going to do. So.
Yep.
Right on.
Yeah, so, other than that... Oh, wait, I didn't finish my thought. That's right, because I remembered. What if Disney Plus, what if they actually do a better job at actually not letting people log in like we do with Netflix?
That will be sad.
I think it won't do very well if they do.
Yeah, I agree. That's the nice
because
thing
right
about
now,
free market.
Netflix has got me hooked. If for some reason, like if we moved away, or if my brother-in-law and my sister reach a point where they've just got too many people on the account, we're probably going to shell out the money for that because we got stuff we're following on there, stuff we want, and we'd probably shell it out. It's the only thing that would stop us would really be just not being able to afford it,
right?
Yeah,
and that's not an issue right now. So and if they played the long term, they probably got us hooked well enough. But
I feel like Disney corporate is going to push for them not to allow people to log in.
Disney would do that. I feel like
So maybe you won't be able to repay yourself.
Well, and really, it's just going to be a cost benefit analysis. It's going to be looking at it's just like, all right, how many customers does the ability to share your account with a select amount of people bring in, versus how many people we're losing on accounts because they can share with someone else.
Yeah,
and they'll price it and give you the ability to have profiles on there right at that tipping point wherever it's most profitable. So,
see, but I only really need 2 slots.
But even still,
one for me, one for my sister.
They can track that because she's out in Indiana, and if they see you log on at the same time, that obviously doesn't make sense, and so they're going to kick someone off.
Not necessarily. It could be a husband and wife.
Living half a country away.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Because World of Warcraft did this, and so that was how.
Really?
Yeah. If there were stories of someone that lived like right on a time zone, like one of the like in a town that bridged a time zone, and so he'd log on at home and then like go to work and log on, but it would just take him a minute or two to get to work. But since the time zone was different, they'd see that hour jump, and Blizzard would think that it was a fraudulent login, or that he was paying someone else to play his account, that sort of thing. So they shut him down, and he had to it was anyway. So maybe not. They do have the ability to not let you do that, to track all that.
Hopefully they wouldn't be that pedantic about it. But
sorry, you just reminded me of I'm going to share this story real quick.
Sure.
It was great. It was from my uncle's funeral. My uncle passed away a few years ago. He was an avid World of Warcraft player. He and I I would play a ton of video games. I just got them all from him because he bought them all, and then he'd just be like, yeah, sure. This was back when, video games were in, PC games were in these big, huge boxes and stuff. But he literally had those stacked along the wall of one room, from wall to wall, from end to end, waist high. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, he had so many games.
Representation of your Steam list.
Yeah, exactly. And so he'd just be like, yeah, just come in, try whatever you want. And I played so many great older games too that I wouldn't have ever picked up if I hadn't had access to his games that he'd been collecting for a decade.
Yeah.
But anyway, he eventually hit World of Warcraft and kind of just stopped buying new games because that scratched the itch he needed.
Yeah, that's happened to a lot of people.
But so we're at his funeral after he passed away, and I think it was my dad was telling stories about his brother, and he gets talking about this. They talked about his World of Warcraft playing and how ridiculous he could be with money sometimes. He's a doctor, he had plenty, so he wasn't that careful with it a lot of time. And they found out that just like, oh yeah, he was buying gold in this game from some guy out in China, and we're just like, oh, that's so ridiculous. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, that was illegal.
Yes, it was.
That was so illegal.
Very illegal.
And so everyone around me is sitting there laughing like, oh, he was paying real money for fake things. And I was like, he was breaking the law. None of you knew. Like, what?
Well, I think that's EULA illegal. That's not like actual laws of the land illegal.
Yeah, but I was like, that could have gotten him banned from the game,
Yeah.
at least. And so I'm sitting here listening to that, and I'm just like, oh, God. And
now
I
we
do
do
know that
that-
some of the countries out there do have actual laws about it. Like
Now they do. Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting them.
But, so, yeah, anyway. And so that's what I thought of when you were talking about it. I just had this moment of just being like, my uncle.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We're
Talking
still
about
doing
sharing
news.
profiles. Yeah, news.
Yeah.
What do you got?
So the next bit of exciting news is that the Rogue One spin-off series that we mentioned a couple episodes ago in the news, it will be beginning its production in October. So that will put them in pre-production right now and getting everything set up.
Do we know yet whether or not Alan Tudyk is going to be attached?
I have not heard.
Cool.
So,
But so they'll be starting production this fall, which likely means fall of 2020.
Yeah.
We will see Cassian Andor's thing.
So there we go. Get excited for that.
Yeah.
And that will be debuting on Disney Plus, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
And that's the news.
Cool. You want me to take this away then, Kylie?
So I'll go ahead and introduce it, and then you can take it away. So basically, the short of this is that I absolutely hate Harry Potter. I just think it's terrible.
And for the record, for no good reason.
No, it's for a very good reason.
Well, we'll
which
get
I'm
into
trying
that
to
right
find.
now.
Yeah, I don't really like it.
I actually think I have a pretty strong idea of what one of the biggest things is for you. We'll get into that
Yeah.
later.
Probably. I think we've talked about it before.
Well, no, just listening to as we've talked about various things in Star Wars and in other things that you don't like. I just earlier when we were in the last episode, I was sitting there like, I actually think this might be part of his problem with Harry Potter now that I think about it. But anyway.
So yeah, I think it's a cheap knockoff of lots of things, but especially Star Wars. And apparently there are those who disagree. But before we get into this, I have to not defend myself, but hush all you haters down just a minute. So I had to do this to Ross earlier when we were getting ready to record this. Because he was like, no, you've not even read the books. How can you hate this? That was my excellent Ross impression. And
And most of the listeners are like, what, that wasn't Ross?
yeah, exactly. And I said, no, I have read most of them. So here's the deal. When I was... It was the summer between...
But a lad.
Yeah, when I was but a
Searching
lad,
for my true vocation.
with cheek of tan, as Chunga would say. Yeah. Anyway.
My father said,
Um,
Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, Chris is off singing a song.
It's like Tourette's, only
It is a
more
little
fun.
bit. Yeah.
Sad thing
a
is
lot
we
more
usually
fun.
can't hear it in the recording.
I'm sure, yeah.
But the summer between my junior and senior year of high school, I met a delightful young lady who will almost certainly never listen to this. Hi, Tiandra. She was delightful. She was a super fun girlfriend. We had a great time. She then told me that all sort of kissing and or other physical benefits to our relationship were suspended until such time as I completed the Harry Potter series.
Ouch.
That is the most
Because
powerful
she
motivator I've ever
loved them. I thought they were dumb because I'd seen like the first movie or two or whatever had come out by then. And I was like, I have no desire to read these books. They seem super dumb. The movies aren't that great. I got nothing. And then she's like, well, I will not make out with you or anything until you have read these. And I was like, fine. So I read books 1 through 6 in about 2 weeks. Blew through them. They got better with each book. I'll give you that. Order of the Phoenix was my favorite. But overall, my impression didn't really change that much by the end of it. Because she also was like, how can you say you hate these? You haven't even read the books. That was what it was this very argument that started this whole thing. And I got done and I'm like, yeah, my opinion didn't really change. I mean, overall they're still better than the movies, for sure, as most books that are adapted to movies tend to be.
Yes.
But I just didn't like it. I felt that she is kind of a... J.K. Rowling is not a great writer, really. I think that a lot of her ideas, I was like, oh, I can see where you got that from. But one of my biggest complaints, and maybe I'll save my biggest complaint for Chris later, because I'm sure he'll bring it up. Or if he doesn't, then I'll bring it up later.
Yep.
But I'm going to let Chris take it away while I try desperately to find this thing that really encapsulates my reasons for why I hate it.
Cool. So I'm going to, my experience with the Harry Potter books began when the fourth book was released. Now, the first three had been starting to create a buzz around our junior high, as where we were at the time. And I had not touched them because they were popular. And
yes, that was my initial hesitation.
And I was young enough to think that because they were popular, that meant they couldn't be good enough for me. I was young enough to not understand how dumb that was. Yeah. And so I wouldn't touch them. But my family has a yearly camping trip that we'd go up into the Uintas each year, the high Uintas here in Utah, and I would we'd always buy a couple books to take with us up there, and you could sit back and kick back and read. And I bought some books for that, and I was all gung-ho to read those, and I had a list of chores and other things that I had to do to get ready for this camping trip before we had to go. I got it all done with like 2 days to spare. Less than that, 1 day to spare. And I had that 1 day, and like it was just this weird day where all of my friends were out of town. Nobody could hang out. Nobody could do anything. And I was just sitting there bored, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to start reading my books. And my mom said, no, you can't read your books. You cannot read your books until we're up there. And I was like, why? It's a day before. And she's like, because if you read your books, you're going to read them all now, and you won't have anything to read up there. And I was like, I'm not going to read these books in 1 day. It's the first 2 Wheel of Time books. Like, among others, but yeah. And she's just like, no, you can't. And she's like, you can read my books if you want. She had bought the first 4 Harry Potter books for her to read up there because the 4th one had just come out. And I went, no, not doing. That's right. I had a day and a half, before we left on the to go to camping, and so I spent half a day just dinking around. And then the next day, I woke up and went, fine. I just want to do something. I'll read a book. So I read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone that morning, or that day. And then I went up into the Uintas. I read my 3 books, which was the first 2 Wheel of Time books, and another book I had, I believe, Running with the Demon by Terry Brooks, one of my favorites. And then I came home and I read the remaining Harry Potter books. So Monday night, I finally finished off the second Wheel of Time book, was done with all my books, picked up book number 2 of Harry Potter, started reading that, and Monday night the next week, I finished number 4 for the second time. So from Monday night to Monday night, I read 2, 3, and 4, and then I read 1, 2, 3, and 4 again.
Wow.
Yeah. I like those books.
Yeah.
I don't like basically anything else associated with the franchise beyond the books.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my complaints about the books, but I do love them. So, anything you want to add, Ross?
I was a late adopter to Harry Potter. I think, I don't even remember when I started reading them. I guess it would have to be junior high, because I was already into them when we all kind of formed as a group. So I guess it would have to be shortly after 4 came out. Yeah. Picked them up and started reading. I was like, oh, that's okay. That's a fine book. I'll continue on. I read the second one, over a couple of days. Same thing with the third. But for some reason, number 4 really hit me, really stuck. It's just like, you know what? I am there. And just, had to make sure I got all the rest of them. I got number 4 in paperback. And then the rest of them, 5, 6, and 7, were all hardback because I loved them so much. And didn't just get them secondhand.
That's why I don't actually own any of the books, is because I have very specific specifications. I have to have them all in hardcover, but I want the British versions. And so I've been...
The art's better.
Well, I don't care about the artwork. I'm not visually oriented like that. I just want the non-Americanized text. Okay. I want the original stuff that was not altered into... Because, as the series goes on, they kept more and more of the British colloquialisms in the text, as they, kind of introducing them bit by bit to the kids that are reading these. But I want it all. I want it all from the start. I want the original text. So I haven't gotten around to buying any of them because it's not easy to find the British edition hardcovers in Utah for a affordable price.
I feel like you haven't been on the internet long enough yet.
Oh, no. I found them all for $50. The dude sold them out from under me to someone else who offered him $100 the day he was supposed to meet me. I was like, no! They were the new editions, too, the black ones with the really pretty cover. Oh, I liked those. Anyway, so, Harry Potter. I'm going to give us a little rundown of... Well, first this episode, where this episode came from. So we, a while back, did our Star Wars and Star Trek episode, where we compared and and contrasted those two franchises. We finished that up, and I said, wow, that was a lot of fun. Like, that was nice to be able to talk about something other than Star Wars, just relating it to Star Wars, and a little change of pace, hopefully for the audience, too. I was like, we could do that with a lot of things, and we're like, oh yeah, we could do that. We could do that with Firefly. We could do that with Lord of the Rings. And then, really just mainly as a joke, because I knew that Kyler hated Harry Potter, I went, well, we could do Star Wars and Harry Potter. And he went, oh... We started saying all this, and then just before you said that, I went, oh, golly, we could probably do that. And then you said it, and I went, no. I was hoping they wouldn't pick it up. That's why I didn't say it.
It's true.
And so, mainly as a way to just mess with Kyler, I was like, yeah, we're good. We'll do this.
Well, but it's funny, though, because of all those that you just mentioned, Harry Potter has the most parallels.
Exactly. That's the thing, is the more I got thinking about it, the more I got talking to my sister about Harry Potter, which we talk about a lot, the more I was like, oh, this is really, like, there's a lot of solid reasons to compare and contrast these two. And so it became more of a, okay, yeah, put this on the list. And then Kyler made us watch the Star Wars Holiday Special, and so it became, no, bump that up on the list. You're making me do that, I'm making you do Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So here we are.
And I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to be here.
Okay, I've come to the sad end of my search for what I was
You couldn't find it?
So, out here in Utah, there's a thing called Studio C.
Yeah, oh... Okay, I'm going to get into that.
So,
you're gonna want to hold off on that.
I was looking
for
the transcript because Studio C, for those who might be listening out of state, don't know what it is. It's kind of like SNL but for Mormons. Mm-hmm. So it's anyway. That's a lot of
it's a BYU Studios production.
Yeah,
you have probably seen their Scott Sterling skit.
Yeah, that's the one that really got big. Yeah. But they've got a number of them that have done
that's
pretty
the one
well.
where the guy gets hit.
They had a couple of them
ball.
go on Conan.
They have
O'Brien,
one, which is,
and they did some Saturday Night Live stuff. They actually,
oh really?
Yeah, they had Kenan Thompson on, and performed in New York for quite a few.
Wow,
yeah.
That's
they actually did the skit you're thinking about. They did a second version of it, contrasting. They did one contrasting Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, and they did one contrasting Star Wars and Harry Potter. And they had Kenan Thompson there for the Saturday Night Live.
Huh.
Yeah.
So they did a sketch called Teddy's Story Joint.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, yeah.
And so the premise of the skit is that you can go into this cafe and order your stories, right? So it's like, I want this kind of a plot with these characters and this subplot, and then they cook it up for like a sandwich or whatever, you know, just kind of silly. So the George Lucas character goes in and he's like, I want a young white chosen one kid, doesn't know he has magic powers,
lives with his aunt
and uncle. His parents are dead. Then he has, it goes through the whole thing. And J.K. Rowling is standing behind him, and she's like, "Oh, I'll have what he's having. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, make that
Yep.
And it's just like down the line, it's the same as Star Wars. And I'm like, "Oh yes, you're a cheap hack, J.K. Rowling." Not to mention, she is an absolute whore for the limelight. She cannot stand to have the attention pulled off of her for even 5 seconds.
All right. Well,
that's more of a personal attack.
Guys, listeners, this is going to be so much fun for us.
This is a civilized podcast.
I'm just going to sit back and watch the fireworks.
Do it. Bring it.
Okay. So, part of the reason I wanted to do this episode is because thinking about common criticisms of Harry Potter, I realized that many of the criticisms of Harry Potter leveled at it are the same ones leveled at Star Wars. And then looking further, I realized that many of the strengths of this and trends of the series are very similar as well. So here's a brief history of the Harry Potter franchise, aka the Wizarding World is apparently the official name of the franchise at this point. Book 1, published in 1997 in Britain, and a little over a year later in 1998 in America.
Wow, that old.
Yeah. Wow. Book 1, Harry Potter and the American Kids Are Too Stupid and Uncultured to Look Up a Philosopher's Stone. Solid book. And then 1998, around the same time the first book was being published in the US, the second book, Harry Potter and the Series of Convenient Parallelizations, was published in the UK, and a year later in 99 in America.
I love your snark, Chris.
Thank you.
It just makes me happy.
Book 3, Harry Potter and the Creepy Guy Who Slept with Young and Teenage Boys as a Rat, was published in 1999 in Britain, and just a few months later, also in 1999 in America, just a couple months after the second book was published in America, actually. And then year 2000, from book 4 onward, they had the same release date in both on both sides of the pond.
Because that's about when I started to hear about it,
Yeah.
was around book 4, I remember.
It's when it really started taking
So wait,
off.
the first book was in 95. How old
97.
No,
were we?
97 in Britain, 98 in
How
in
old
America.
were we at the time?
That it came out in the US, we would have been, in 97, we would have been 11 or about 11 when it came out.
11 or 12, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're like the target audience for these books.
Yeah.
I just hated them.
I could have sworn I had a 5th grade teacher start reading us the first book.
Seems improbable.
Yeah, because it would have been much later.
Yep.
Maybe there was something else that was just very
I
similar.
mean, they printed it in English first and then American, so how would she even...
But yeah, year 2000, we had the release of book 4, Harry Potter and the Unbreakable Contract he didn't even sign. Unbreakable Blood Contract, sorry. 2003...
If you're going to snark, Chris, get your titles right.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm sorry, man. Book 5 came out in 2003. Harry Potter and the author remembers that he's a hormonal teenager. Book 6, 2005. Harry Potter and the gut-punching ending that will be undercut and undone in the next book, so don't worry about it. And Book 7 in 2007. Harry Potter and the everybody pretends that wands have always worked that way. After the original 7 books, we had a number... The franchise started to expand. We had a number of shorter pieces that Joe Rowling wrote for charity. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, based on a text mentioned in the books, and Quidditch Through the Ages. And then later, for another charity event, Tales of Beedle the Bard. And then she's also released assorted very short stories, mainly on Pottermore, I believe. But there are a few little bits and pieces that have come that she's released here and there. In addition to that, the series was adapted into 8 movies. After the 8 movies, there was a play/published script of the play, Harry Potter and the Mediocre Fanfic. And then now they're working on a new series of 5 movies, based, quote unquote, off of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Basically just tacked that title on to give it this veneer of being adapted from something, even though it had nothing to do whatsoever with that at all.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that the in-universe person who's supposed to have written Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is the main character in these new movies. And then in addition to that, we've had numerous video games, mostly movie tie-ins, but a few that weren't. There's tourist attractions, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter in a few different locations, and the Making of Harry Potter in Britain is another tourist attraction they have. And then the Pottermore website, which is a website that Joe Rowling set up where she released little bits and tidbits of background information and world-building stuff, and where people can go to get their house, take official quizzes to find out what their house is and what their Patronus is and everything. What's your house, Ross?
Gryffindor, but I took it in the original launch.
No,
Apparently
okay.
you said that there was...
Yeah, you'd be
If you're anything but Gryffindor, Ross, I'll eat my shoe.
And my house is not Gryffindor. That's all I know.
Yep.
So
I'm a proud Slytherin.
I think you're gonna have to retell the not Gryffindor.
Have I told that on
I think
here?
you told us, but
You've
I don't
told
think you
us, you haven't told
Okay,
the fans.
so I took the Pottermore quiz way back when Pottermore was a very new thing, and I was assigned to Hufflepuff, which surprised me. But looking back, I'm like, yeah, I'm laid back enough to be a Hufflepuff. I was really expecting Ravenclaw or Slytherin though, but I got Hufflepuff. And then a couple years later, they did this big thing. It was like, oh yeah, it's been revamped. We got an all-new quiz. And then so I was like, okay, I'll go take the new quiz. And that one assigned me to Slytherin. And I was like, that's what I originally expected, but I don't really feel like that makes a lot of sense at this point after having thought about it for a while. Oh well. And then they put the Patronuses on there, and I went back to do that, and for some reason could not get into my old account. I couldn't even figure out what email address I had it on. So I just made a new one, which meant before I could get my Patronus, I had to take the house quiz again. And I got Ravenclaw. And I went, well, this is ridiculous, and I'm not taking this Pottermore quiz anymore, but I want to know. So I said, I'm sure there are a bajillion which Hogwarts house are you quizzes on the internet.
Yep.
I'll just take a few of those. And I did. I took 6 of them. I got 2 Hufflepuff, 2 Slytherin, and 2 Ravenclaw. And so at that point I went, screw it, I'm sick of this. If anyone asks, I'll just say I'm not Gryffindor.
Not Gryffindor,
Yeah, not Gryffindor.
And then they think you're being mysterious when really...
No, it's just, that's the best I got.
know.
I think it's a slight against Gryffindor. They think you're snobbing
Well, I'm not
against
Gryffindor.
Not Gryffindor.
Yeah, those Gryffindors, I am not Gryffindor, everybody. There was never any doubt that I was not that. But
That's very true.
But yeah, my Patronus is a fox, by the way. I was happy with that.
I haven't taken the Patronus quiz, so I don't know what mine is.
Yeah. I was delighted with that, actually. That's part of why I wouldn't go back, because I originally thought, I'll just make a new account and go in, and if I get whichever one I get there, I'll have one more of that than any of the others, and I'll know that's. But I didn't want to risk losing my fox, so. Because it matters so much.
You could just make another burner account and just let it run.
Yeah, no. I'm good.
Too much work now.
I just said I'm Ravenclaw. Because, if Harry can tell the Sorting Hat not Slytherin and have the Sorting Hat say, okay, you're in Gryffindor, then I can just say, nope, I'm Ravenclaw.
Well, fair enough.
We have huge amounts of fan works / parodies, such as the Harry Potter Puppet Pals and a Harry Potter musical.
Also, a really killer music video parody of... oh, crap. No, I can't think of what it's...
as long as we're talking about videos, though, if you go to search Tobuscus and his Deathly Hallows literal video trailer, that one is pretty delightful. I'll show that to you guys after this, but I'll post that in the Facebook group. But and then that is the franchise as it stands at the moment. They've got 2 of the Fantastic Beasts movies out, with 3 to come. Those are being written by Joe Rowling. After Star Wars, it does come just after Star Wars as the 3rd best-selling movie franchise of all time. Marvel is first. Though the numbers I was looking at the date, it may very well have surpassed Star Wars with Crimes of Grindelwald. And Star Wars will probably pass it back up with Episode 9. But the entire franchise value, not just movie-wise, it does come in after Star Wars by a significant margin, but Star Wars is only 5th overall.
There it is. God, I cannot... I was singing the song in my head and couldn't think of what the actual song was called. The parody of Uptown Funk.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Dark Lord Funk.
Dark Lord Funk is
done
delightful.
right here in Provo.
Yeah.
Actually. Really fantastic parody video.
Yeah, that one is delightful.
I feel like it's probably another Studio C one because they've done several. Is it not?
Nope.
But yeah, for fun, would you guys care to guess what the 4 franchises that are worth more than Star Wars are? The media this is in general media franchises. Marvel is not.
Superhero.
As an entire franchise, as the movie franchise, the Marvel franchise is the most best-selling movie franchise of all time.
Movies.
But as the entirety of the franchise, all media tie-in sales, all books, all video games, all merchandising.
There are 4 bigger than Star Wars?
There are 4 bigger than Star Wars.
James Bond?
No, though Bond is arguably... Adjusting for inflation and a couple other things, you could argue that
there were a bunch of books and 25 movies or something
with
like
the
that,
movie,
so.
you could... There is an argument to be made, apparently, depending on how you adjust the figures, that James Bond could be more... No. Harry Potter comes in well below Star Wars.
Good.
Not well below. It's catching up, but...
All of Disney, I bet they would lump together as one.
No, they did not lump all of Disney's is broken out by what the official media franchises are, so...
Oh, really?
Mickey Mouse and Friends is number 4, just above Star Wars.
Okay.
Is that one of the children's cartoons?
No, that's just in general, anything Mickey Mouse.
That's fair, because Mickey Mouse has been around for literally almost 100 years.
That is, as you're going through this list, you'll find that very few of them are young enough to really be that young. The Wizarding World Harry Potter is close to the youngest on here.
Wow.
Close to. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, just the Cinematic Universe as a franchise, not including all of Marvel, is also on here just behind Harry Potter, and it is the youngest on here. But,
wow.
So it's Star Wars is number 5, Mickey Mouse and Friends is number 4, Winnie the Pooh is number 3.
Oh, see, and that's almost another that he was in the 30s that he was created.
But it's
Star Wars is
really dormant.
Star Wars is estimated at $65 billion.
Yeah, but it's really dormant in terms of movies. But you think about, because this is including everything. This is toys and everything. How much Winnie the Pooh?
Well, here, let me give you.
You also don't have kids yet, Ross. Winnie the Pooh is alive and well on Disney Junior.
Well, and let me give you this too. Mickey Mouse and Friends is at $70 billion. Winnie the Pooh is at $75 billion. Now, out of those, if you look at Star Wars, the breakdown I've got here, merchandise sales of that $65 billion is $40 billion.
Woo!
Box office is almost $10 billion. Home video is another $9 billion. Video games are almost $5 billion.
Nice.
Book sales are almost $2 billion.
If they put out a decent video game, I'd buy I'd get more.
Fingers crossed for the Respawn.
Yeah, no kidding.
But then when you get up to Mickey Mouse, that $70 billion, $69.85 billion is retail sales.
Oh my!
Winnie the Pooh is
goodness.
estimated around 75 billion. 74.5 billion of that
is so
is
much
retail
money.
sales. It's the plushies, it's the books,
yeah.
it's the everything.
That is
it's not even the movies.
So much money.
Or books,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my
Box
gosh.
office for Winnie the Pooh is estimated about 427 million.
Oh yeah, that's nothing. Because
Yeah.
again, he's dormant on the screen, but toys. And
Number
stuff,
2?
books, yeah.
Hello Kitty.
Whoa! Wait
Wait a minute. Then number 1 will be Beanie Babies.
Nope. $80 billion for Hello Kitty.
Kitty. Actually, that I can buy.
And
that.
number 1 at about 85 billion. And the just slightly older than Harry Potter, actually, one of the younger ones on here. Pokemon.
Oh,
of course.
wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense though because the cards are being counted in here.
We got
and those
61
are
billion
not
for
cheap.
licensed merchandise. You got video games at 15 billion, card games at 10 billion.
Oh my gosh, 61
Manga
billion.
sales at 1.5 billion.
Hold on.
Yeah.
61 billion for card sales, which means our
No,
card sale.
10 billion.
Oh, 10 billion. Okay.
61 was licensed merchandise. Like the
Oh,
shirt
gotcha,
my son
gotcha.
was wearing
Yeah.
yesterday.
Okay.
And all of their plushies and the
Yeah.
games and all of that.
Still though, when your card sales equal the home videos or surpass the home video sales of Star Wars,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's not nothing.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive. So yeah,
Well,
Pokemon.
and actually, I think that's probably also counting in Japan's numbers.
Oh yeah. This is
Because-
worldwide.
Yeah.
They go fanatical
Yeah.
for Pokemon stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like when he said it, I was like, "Oh yeah."
Well, and that's
course.
one of Star Wars' particular weakness when it comes to competing on these is that it's not a worldwide phenomenon to the degree
Yeah.
that a lot of other things are, like
Yeah.
the Marvel.
It does
Cinematic
well
Universe.
in North America, does okay in Europe,
Pretty well in Europe, yeah.
and then hit or miss in China.
Yeah.
And
And
those
so-
are your 3 big areas.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, Harry Potter, after Star Wars possibly having surpassed Star Wars at this point, the 3rd or 2nd best-selling movie franchise of all time. It's like 9th or 10th franchise value overall, with Star Wars at 5th.
Can't let Harry Potter.
So when it comes to Harry Potter, let's discuss this. There's a lot of comparisons made to Star Wars and Harry Potter. Let me read to you what verbatim what I described here. There are a lot of what I consider to be very stupid comparisons between Star Wars and Harry Potter out there, focused on very superficial aspects or very forced similarities.
As Chris rolls his eyes at me.
No, the Teddy story joint is one that they're spare enough that one's not bad. The other, so they have the studios, he has the Lord of the Rings / Harry Potter comparison video, and the one that they did when they were out in New York with Kenan Thompson was the Star Wars versus Harry Potter comparison. And that one had a lot of really dumb comparisons that are really superficial. So I thought you were going for that one, and I was like, oh no. The Teddy story joint, they kept it pretty simple, and so it's pretty.
Yeah.
So for example, you got like comparisons between Luke and Harry are generally pretty valid. There's a lot of similarities between them, mainly because they are both a pretty generic chosen one hero's journey protagonist.
Yeah.
They're both basically kept pretty palatable, they're a nice guy. There's not too much more to them than that, aside from a brief period where Harry got really hormonal, and a period towards the end there where Luke had a really dark period. And
Just about beats his father to death.
well, I was referring to the whole crushed by failure thing, but
Oh yeah, that too. Oh, well, sorry, I blocked the terribleness of episode 8.
but yeah, a lot of really strong comparisons there. Comparisons between Han Solo and Ron Weasley. I almost said Ron Swanson. Between
Can you imagine Ron Swanson in the Harry
Swanson.
Potter world?
stick Ron Swanson anywhere, I'll be delighted.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Comparisons
Oh.
between Han and Ron, Leia and Hermione, Obi-Wan and Yoda versus Dumbledore are
But again, that one
sometimes
is,
valid.
Well, specifically Yoda and Dumbledore. I mean, that's just your very archetypal
Yes,
hero's journey
exactly.
mentor.
They're sometimes valid, sometimes they're really superficial. Like, you'll get some people that are just like, oh, it's just like, I have this generic hero who was trained by a white dude with a beard. Oh my god, it's like, white dude with a beard doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything. Like, that is not story valid. That's nothing. Like, that has no valid merit to an actual comparison between these two things. I don't care, about a white dude with a beard. It's more the character that I'm concerned about. The writing, of course, because it's me. Thematic / stylistic comparisons are often valid, because there's a lot of similarities there and that I'd want to delve into. most other common comparisons you run into are usually a stretch to try and make the similarities between the series seem more similar, or to try and shore up the very few amount of similarities that they actually have by saying, oh, there's a ton more. So I actually linked to a couple articles as I was going through this that I was just like, what? You're comparing those? Like, you're actually listing that as some sort of valid comparison. So, like this one. This is a list of that I found online. It's got a list of 10 things that are basically the same thing between these. Number 1, unearthly shapes, sizes, and species, because they both have all sorts of weird creatures. And I'm like, are you effing serious?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
pick
totally
up
not
anything
valid.
that is fantasy or science fiction. Like, that is a staple of fantasy and science fiction.
Yeah, that's totally not a valid critique.
Misunderstood upbringing. Both protagonists were raised in uninspiring settings by an aunt and uncle who did not understand them. Which I'm like, I don't feel like Owen and Beru didn't understand him in the slightest. Like, they understood perfectly.
They understood him pretty well. I mean, that's literally the conversation they have.
And that's the thing that everyone does.
Right? He's got a lot of his father in him. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Yeah. Like, they understand Luke well.
And that's the thing that everyone tries to ignore, too, when they're just like, oh, look, they were both raised by their aunt and uncle. And it's like, yeah, one was a pair of abusive a-holes who treated him like crap, and the other were a pair of actually supportive, decent parents who immediately got killed off because while the others remained alive.
And that's the other thing, too, with, like, Uncle Owen. Yeah, he's kind of hard on Luke, but, like, they're doing the best they can, literally farming water in a desert.
Yeah.
Life's gonna be tough, man. Sorry. Like, he's not a jerk for being a jerk's sake the way the Dursleys are.
Yeah.
Look at me name drop like I know what I'm talking about.
Number 3, magic and the Force.
Well, it's fantasy.
Yeah,
so...
they exist. I'm like, and the one point he makes here that I'm like, that's a little bit, is that the power behind them seems to be genetically inherited more often than not, but both can seem to be able to just spontaneously show up too. And then that's valid. That seems like the Force definitely has a genetic component to it a lot of the time, but it also just kind of shows up sometimes. So that's basically how it seems to work in Harry Potter land. And it's like, and perhaps both the Force and magic require a great deal of responsibility and control. After all, there is a looming dark side for either. And I'm like, no, there's not. No. There is no dark side. There's dark magic. But that's basically just taking magic and using it evilly. Mm-hmm. But there's not a dark side that you have to beware of falling to because it will consume your mind and turn you into a different person the way it did, like, with Anakin Skywalker. Like, that's just not a thing in the Harry Potterverse.
I would argue that the dark side of the Force... This is going back to our, like, Grey Jedi discussion from a couple episodes ago, that there is the Force... If you're a good person with an appropriate moral compass who wants to do good things and help people, you're going to use that force for good.
But again,
if you're a selfish jerk, then and that I.
But it's also
hold on. That was original canon. Remember, now they are actually pushing more towards there is a light side.
Well, but I mean, even if you just take the original trilogy, Return of the Jedi revolves around Palpatine trying to get Luke to strike out at him in anger because Luke will fall to the dark side. Like, try and find me someone who actually thinks killing the Emperor is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not. But the Emperor knows that if he can get him to do this in the wrong way, it will somehow corrupt him in such a way that he will potentially be beyond redemption there.
See, and even as a kid, though, I viewed that as a comparison or whatever to human morality. That, the more you give in to your selfish desires, and anger, frankly, is a selfish desire, then the easier it will be to be that selfish in the future, and it builds and builds and builds until you have sort of fallen to the dark side. The only way to keep yourself from that is, of course, to maintain self-control from the get-go, right? And that's, of course, Obi-Wan's message to Luke is maintain self-control, right? You need to do these things.
But see, what I'm saying here is the Emperor's entire plan in Return of the Jedi hinged upon getting Luke to, he's planning for Luke to fall to the dark side by doing something that arguably would not really even be evil.
Yeah.
He's trying to cut down the bad guys in a situation where, I'm looking at that and I'm like, this isn't like murdering someone over a peace treaty here. It's straight up, hey, you're our prisoner, and we're evil and killing your friends. But the idea there is there's something more here than just... Because if this were just the real world, I'd say, yeah, Luke should have just killed him. He'd have been fine.
Yeah.
Like he might have been a little bit like that maybe was not the best way to handle it, but hey, I basically saved the galaxy
Results.
here.
Yeah.
I'd say that's pretty justified, and he could move on. The very fact that Palpatine is counting on him to fall to the dark side over this, and even thought he had when he cut Vader's hand off, starts prematurely gloating because he's there, he's doing it, implies that that's not realistic. That's not how we work in real life. Mm-hmm. We don't lose our temper once and then, well, that's that, you're lost forever. And obviously that's not how it works in Star Wars too, because you can still come back from that. But there's obviously some component there that Palpatine expected to come into play that Luke managed to fight off. Anyway, I would argue, either way, I would argue that there is no dark side to the magic in Harry Potter. There's nobody's warning you about falling to the dark side in Harry Potter.
I would definitely agree.
It's just something you're using well or you're not.
Yeah.
Number 4, John Williams, which is a lot of comparisons there, but for me it's always just like...
so they picked an extremely talented composer to do music here.
Well, and it's more than
and
that
picked
too.
a
It's
talented composer to do it over here.
That comes to one of my big frustrations with when people start talking about Harry Potter is Harry Potter is a series of books. It got adapted into some mediocre to crappy movies, but it is a series of books. So John Williams is a secondary aspect of Harry Potter for me.
And even still, he scored less than half of the series.
Well, and also another comparison here.
Only a third of the series.
And also, John Williams scored all of Star Wars, working with George Lucas from the outset. John Williams was selected by a bunch of people who aren't the creator of Harry Potter to create this movie they were working on, not by Joe Rowling from the outset. He was a later addition to a franchise. That, yes, it's there, they're both there, but it's a superficial characteristic.
Well, and honestly, my complaint about the Harry Potter movies is that there wasn't more John Williams in it. Because like we were talking in the last episode about how he does his themes for people and events and things like that. He does that, especially really well in the first Harry Potter. But after he's gone, everything he's written is just completely gone except for the main theme. Yep. Which I was so sad about.
Yoda is a more cuddly Dumbledore, which I'm like, he's a mentor character.
They're going to be very similar.
Well, and that's the thing too, is I'm just kind of like, it's a pretty superficial, it goes back and forth whether or not people decide to compare Dumbledore to Obi-Wan or to Yoda. And the very fact that they do that back and forth shows to me that it's this is a superficial comparison. Basically, you're saying, well, they both have mentors. Ooh.
No, dang it, we want Harry Potter to go it alone, okay?
This one. Number 6, phallic weapons of choice. You get your lightsaber or your blade. And I'm just like, okay, look. Throughout history, there have generally been 2 primary types of weaponry. There are melee weapons, which are designed to allow you to hit someone who's trying to hit you before they can hit you, which implies that you're going to have a greater reach, which of necessity means your weapon is going to be long. It has nothing to do with penises. Yep. It's just a practical design.
I'm just gonna chime in here as the official historian on this podcast and confirm everything that Chris just said. It's a matter of practicality. Yes. Nobody's sitting here going, I like my penis so much I'd like to make a sharp, longer version of it. Oh, look at that! It's also convenient for stabbing.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody is doing that, okay? It is exactly what Chris said. I need my sword to be longer than yours so that I can stab you without myself getting stabbed.
Yep.
Faster, which is the the fencer in me also verifying.
Yeah.
Stop it.
And then the second half of the weaponry is I'm going to create something that will allow me to shoot something at someone before they can ever get close enough to hit me. Which, longbows, slings, and stuff were the pinnacle of weaponry, but over time we progressed from that to I'm going to get this tube and cause a tiny explosion at one side to launch this missile down the tube so that I can guide it properly. And because the longer that tube is, generally speaking, the better the guidance is going to be, they became long weapons. Mm-hmm. Because that's just practical. And then magic wands have a long history of it. They started out as, we're using willow switches and stuff like that for magic, and then they developed into this tradition of you have a wand that you use for magic. It had nothing to do. They were actually associated with witchcraft primarily, not with anything male symbolism related. Yep. And so it's just that's just... And again, pick any movie where someone is using something to fight. I tried to find it for this, but I don't have it. Wouldn't have mattered. None of our listeners can see it. But I have a t-shirt that is the Deathly Hallows. My mother bought for me. It is the Deathly Hallows symbol made up of geeky items from various franchises. It has a lightsaber on it. It has a wand on it. It has Gandalf's staff on it. It has the Master Sword from Zelda on it. It has a ton of these. They're all long, straight objects. It has the Dr. Screwdriver. They're all long, straight objects just because that's a practical design for what all of these objects are. Not because... Also because long, straight objects are convenient to hold in your hand because they are narrow enough to fit there.
Yep.
It's not phallic. There's no reason for it to be. Yeah. The guy to introduce them to the journey. Which I'm just like, yes, heroes get introduced to their journey.
Like, literally, didn't we already introduce this
in this
concept?
case, it's saying Harry and Hagrid and Obi-Wan are basically the same thing. Like totally, right?
Well, no.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. Oh, and Vader and Voldemort, they're both deformed hypovitamin D sufficient... hypovitamin D sufficient? Deficient, I think you meant? Pale men who are primarily driven by their fear of mortality. It's like...
no.
One of them's primarily driven by his desire to rule the galaxy and keep it safe.
And has almost no fear of his mortality.
Yeah. None whatsoever.
Because he knows he's mostly robot and any injuries he sustains can be very
He's
easily
already come
replaced.
closer to death than anyone else needs to. It's, yeah.
So,
and I'm just like, again, that's just you forcing something to try and make a comparison.
Well, not even that, but it's a bad force at that. One of them is afraid of mortality. Definitely Voldemort.
Yeah.
Vader is so not afraid of mortality. I question this person ever having seen Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, that
well,
is
and I'm also
such
too.
a
It's
bad
like the
comparison.
pale vitamin D deficient guys. It's like, yeah, for one scene in all of Star Warsdom, he is that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, he is a bad A, terrifying black armored dude. It's like that's not what they
or
are.
a regular flesh toned person.
And let's be fair, I think Vader is more scary than Voldemort. Does a better job at being an intimidating.
I agree. Yes. Then you've got this one that goes around a lot that has Star Wars A New Hope, synopsis, and then crossed out Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone written above that. And it basically goes through a description of Star Wars, but has all of the Star Wars specific things like Luke Skywalker's crossed out and replaced with Harry Potter, Tatooine crossed and replaced with Suburbia, etc., going through this. Next time you see this, if you've seen this online, maybe I'll post it, but I don't really want to because it's dumb. Just read this. Don't read it like, oh, look at all those witty comparisons. Read it as, does this sound like a way to describe either Star Wars or Harry Potter? If you're not deliberately trying to arrange this description in a way that would make them seem similar, does this sound like an accurate, useful description of Star Wars or an accurate, useful description of Harry Potter? You can do that with all of these, and the answer is no, it never does, because they have to force this. They're selectively picking all the things that are useful to compare, and they're all extremely superficial, just to try and make it look like, oh, look how massively similar these things are, when they're not. Really, at the end of the day, the reason these are similar is because they are both heavily influenced by the hero's journey. Like, Lucas was deliberately setting out to do that. J.K. Rowling is writing in a, especially because she's writing in a children's genre to start out. Like, she's writing a very familiar archetype that we are all familiar with. But just because a hero's journey exists doesn't make one a ripoff of the other. This one had further. It has a
and this goes back to our discussion where we talked about that Lucas's influences. It's like episode 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
Of our podcast, where we talked about stealing artfully, right? Yeah. That there is the hero's journey out there. It's an archetype that shows up all over the place, so it's going to be hard to not pull at least some elements of it into your story whenever you're creating fiction. But it's a matter of, do you do it well when you pull it in?
Yeah.
Do you twist it enough so that it feels unique and new while still being familiar, right? And we discussed how, and all agreed on, if I remember right, that George Lucas did that phenomenally well, right?
Yep.
That he very artfully stole from the hero's journey and really did make something that was simultaneously familiar and new. And this is where I think J.K. Rowling stumbled, if not outright failed. I think it's pretty clear to see. I don't think she stole well from it.
I would disagree personally, but because I don't think she was consciously stealing anything.
As I say, be prepared to back that up, but I think I want to continue with
because I'm going through every comparison that I see pretty rapidly falls into this, where it's just a series of forced similarities to try and another one that I've seen this one a couple times where it has a series of photos side by side. So you've got the hero, and it has a picture of Harry, and it has a picture of Luke, and then you have the trio, which has Harry and Ron and Hermione, and then it has Luke and Han and Leia.
Well, looking at those pictures too, a lot of those appear to be promotional pictures for the films.
Yeah.
And of course you're going to strike your hero in a heroic pose.
Well, but it's...
You know what I mean? Like,
more than just that, though. It's just that, like, saying this, like, oh, look, they each have a trio with 2 guys and 1 girl. It's like, yeah, a lot of the... There's a trope on TV tropes called the power trio. Because a trio is a really useful... If you're a writer, if you're writing something, having a trio of main characters is a really effective way to manage things. There are a lot of ways you can create, 3 distinct personalities that play off each other well and work well together. 3 is like this ideal number that works best and is quite manageable, especially if you're a beginning writer like J.K. Rowling was. It's not, it's not... There aren't 3 of these, 2 guys and a girl, because she's ripping off Star Wars. There's 3 of these because that's what happens in stories. That's why you have Kirk, Spock, and Bones. That's why it happens all over the place. It's why Frodo and Sam and Gollum end up wandering just the 3 of them without anyone else around. It's why after Merry and Pippin get dragged off, you've got Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas. It's 3 is the magic number. Those were the 3
I was thinking of.
Yeah, and it just happens naturally. It's a really good way to write.
Matt, Perrin, and Rand from Wheel of Time.
Matt, Perrin, and Rand is a great example.
The 3 ladies too, Avienda, Egwene, and...
depending on how you're going to divide them up. They're all over the place, but yeah, and like
Elaine, that's right.
And see, in this one, as you get further down, it's like you've got the reliable friend with Ron and Han, and I'm like, I guess you could describe them that way. Like Ron, sure, that would not be my first.
I still imagined Ron Swanson. Yeah. I was like,
that would not be my
reliable friend.
That would not be my first choice of descriptor for Han, but it would describe him, I guess.
He ends up being that way, but
but he spends the first. I mean, the almost all of 4 not being reliable.
Yeah,
and 5 kind of being reliable, but then also having to be like, I've got really pressing personal issues. Bye.
Yeah.
Then
you've got the female friend / reliables girl, which of course is Hermione and Leia, which again, I'm like, that's really watered down idea of what these are.
I was just going to say, that seems overly simplistic and frankly kind of sexist just to be like, well, she's just a female.
Exactly.
No, Hermione is much more than just a female, and so is Leia.
Yep.
Like, that's a bad comparison.
Then you've got the hairy friend, which would be Hagrid and Chewie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Which, just stop and let that sink in. They're trying to claim that these are so similar because they're comparing Hagrid and Chewie. Because they're both hairy and tall.
That is a bad comparison.
It is. And that's the sort of thing that you encounter in these lists all the time. Got the old wise bearded teacher.
Their characters are not the same at all.
The bald mini teacher. You have Professor Flitwick and Yoda, which I'm just like, okay, Flitwick, you could remove from the Harry Potter series. I'm not saying, like, rewrite it. I'm saying literally lift out any mention of Flitwick and it won't change a thing.
Yeah, for real.
Yoda is central to the Star Wars series.
Is.
Like, trying to compare those and say that these are the same because they're both small not only seems sizist, but also just stupid.
That's... Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is the sort of thing that goes on a lot of time. We got the uncle, parents are dead. We've got the special ability, the magic and the force. Because the special ability exists. These are the same thing. Robes. You've got a picture of them in their school robes and a picture of the Jedi in their robes. Same thing, guys. Learn to move stuff without touching it, using the force or using Wingardium Leviosa, which I'm like, yeah, this one trick that they use in the first book and never come up with again, that's totally analogous to
show me in Harry Potter where somebody force lightning someone else to death, and I'll be into that. then you might have like a...
might get Kyler's attention there.
Yeah.
But you do have other analogous abilities.
You have some that are similar, but that's going to happen with any magic
You either
system.
have the killing curse or the extreme pain curse, whatever, Cruciatus, whatever it was. So I mean, both of those.
But
none of them have a lightning effect.
Yeah, that's the
thing. But they do the same things.
Yeah. You got bad guys, generic masked minions with the stormtroopers and the
Death Eaters. But that is so common throughout all fantasy.
Yeah. Well, and also the fact that the stormtroopers are foot troopers that are there from the very beginning, whereas the Death Eaters aren't even that important even once they do show up. They don't even manage to fulfill the same role as the stormtroopers.
Yeah.
They're not that plot central, and not even as plot central as a stormtrooper. That's pretty sad.
That's really sad.
And then we have a picture of Dean Thomas and Lando Calrissian saying token.
The token black guy.
Which is a common joke. And again, I look at that and I'm like, comparing Dean Thomas to Lando Calrissian is kind of ridiculous, because Lando, while he was the sole token black guy for a very long time,
He's also
is actually a character who goes through a character arc and is of importance to the plot.
Extremely important in episode 6 because the Death Star doesn't blow up without Lando.
Well, and in 5, he goes through this character arc. He's an actual person. Dean Thomas is not a character of importance.
But that's what I'm saying about Lando. Without Lando, the Death Star 2 does not explode.
Yeah. Well,
because
I'm saying
Han can blow up the shield generator. Great.
The most important thing that Dean Thomas does is date Ginny for a while in the background. Like, it's nothing. So these are the sort of things that people are usually comparing when they're talking about it, and it is massively superficial, and it bothers me. Now, the whole reason I wanted to do this is because there are plenty of really strong comparisons. My comparisons between them, though, are mostly not in the stories themselves. Here's what I like to compare. The reception of these. They're both huge phenomenons. Well-loved to an alarming degree. That were created primarily...
Wait a minute there, Chris. It's kind of close to home.
It is kind of alarming, though.
That's why I didn't say anything. I was kind of like, well, yeah, that's fair.
I'm not saying a bad degree, just a little alarming.
Okay. Continue.
Both created primarily by a single central auteur. It's very much this. One was the creation of George, one was the creation of Joe.
But there's even still enough debate on all the revisions they did to George's.
But
that's fair. The core of it, though, it was very much
Lucas,
George's driving.
Because the revisions and stuff were mostly just let's tighten up the dialogue. Let's maybe not have this. Can we combine these two characters? It was little stuff like that. But the overall story is Lucas.
So we've got George and we've got Joe, and there is a lot of similarity to that. Just this was primarily the creation of these individuals. She is incidentally the first billionaire author in history.
Wow!
Good for her. First person to become a billionaire merely through their authoring.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
It is amazing.
That's
but yeah, impressive. Created primarily by a single central auteur whose evolving approach to / writing of the series is increasingly alienating to their fans. which is to say that Joe Rowling has ERD, which is what I call excessive retconning disorder, also known as George Lucas syndrome. Mm-hmm. Yes, and we can get into that in a minute, but you've got fans across multiple generations and ages. Like this landed really well with people just across generational gaps. Yeah. Children pick this up.
My mom was into it when it first came out.
I was more in the region of the... I was... When book 4 came out, we were 14.
We were the target audience, but it was my mom.
And I got him because my mom
our family.
Yeah, exactly. And
then my sisters. My mom got
and
my
grandmother was reading them. They
wow.
Yeah, they're very popular and continue to be very popular across all sorts of ages. Just like Star Wars. They both connect with people on a kind of primal archetypal level. At the end of the day, Harry Potter's appeal is not one of really high quality, and as much as I hate to say it, Star Wars isn't always either.
Shut up, Chris.
Depending on how we're defining quality here. But yeah, Harry Potter and Star Wars are both riddled with things that either are problems or could be construed as problems. But at the end of the day, that's not why people don't care about that, because what they do have, what they bring to them, is just this magical feeling of childhood, of something they love, of something that's captured their imagination in a way that they can't quite understand or explain. It's amazing.
See, and I wonder if that's why I dislike Harry Potter, is because for me, my heart was already stolen by Star Wars by the time Harry Potter came along.
The rest of us just have more open hearts.
Nope.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nope. My love of Star Wars is just so big it takes up all of my...
based on what we've seen in this podcast, I think that's a valid statement.
The ice encasing his heart has squished the room that he has for other franchises.
Hey, it's not ice. It's just Imperial armored.
So, and that is the core for me of what makes these so similar. Why it's useful to look at them and compare them is because that core of why they're so loved to such an amazing degree is basically the same at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I mean, all those other comparisons, I feel like it's like having a we got a pumpkin pie over here with whipped cream on top, and that's our Star Wars, and then over here we've got this chocolate strawberry cake with actual strawberries in it, and people are going, well, they both have flour, they both get baked in an oven, they both have, well, one has a vegetable in it and one has a fruit in it. Those are both edible plants. These are the same thing.
Eat them with
a fork. These are the same thing. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that it's just like, no, that's stupid. They're not the same thing. They are both desserts. and I love them both because they are very tasty and particularly appeal to my taste buds, but they are absolutely not the same thing. There are strong similarities, and there are it's definitely some arguments to be made for things being, straight up out of Star Wars, mainly because Star Wars is the most well-known for doing it best. But most of it, I feel like, is a hero's journey thing. There is a strong wish fulfillment aspect to these. We discussed this earlier, where I'm saying that it's just like, I guess that wasn't on the podcast, but Star Wars has always had a very strong wish fulfillment aspect, where it's this idea of getting to be the hero that captures the imagination of Luke is going out and doing what we would if we were in that scenario, which is part of why Last Jedi hit so many people so hard, is because that's not what that is about. This is not about people going out and doing what we would in that scenario. It's about people going out and doing what we would actually do in that scenario. And we don't want to see what we would actually do. We want to see what we like to think.
My life's already full of disappointment. I don't want to see Luke do that.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. And there's definitely an argument to be made for, that is a step away from what Star Wars had always been. And I get why a lot of people were really burned by that. I was at first too.
There's hope for you yet.
But I got over it once I realized how well composed it was. Anyway, but that strong wish fulfillment aspect is really strong in both. Spurred huge numbers of imitators and brought their genres to new popularity in both cases. Take a glance at all the sci-fi stuff that came out after Star Wars. Take a glance at the sheer number of just all the imitators of Harry Potter out there, from Percy Jackson to Artemis Fowl to Alcatraz by Brandon Sanderson. They're not all the same thing, but there is definitely a very common thread of Harry Potter imitation there.
Wait, Alcatraz by Brandon Sanderson?
Yeah, he's got a series of middle grade books that. And again, to say saying that those are basically Harry Potter is like saying that Harry Potter is basically Star Wars.
Gotcha.
But
so not at all, but probably way better written.
It's still an imitator. Gotcha. It came afterwards because it's an imitator in the way that all of those pseudo Latin choral chants in movies were after Duel of the Fates came out, like we said last episode, where it's just that became really popular because it was really cool and everyone wanted to try it. And Harry Potter made this young boy going out and having adventures plot really popular, so we're going to do it. And it happened left and right. Quite successfully in all of the cases that I just listed, too. I mean, to dismiss those as just being Harry Potter ripoffs is not nice, but they are imitators. Widely loved, but often strongly criticized for many of the same reasons as Star Wars. Dismissed as childish or less adult than should be taken seriously. Criticized for its black and white morality instead of greater complexity. Criticized for familiar story turns. For lacking sufficient logical rigor. In Star Wars, it's usually that's not how the technology should work.
A parsec is a distance.
Yes, you can't have a city the size that covers an entire planet. It wouldn't work because of emissions and so forth. Whereas in Harry Potter, it's, that magic doesn't make sense. Why would you even have this if you can't do that? And why do it's people who love Brandon Sanderson for his magical rigor going, but that doesn't make sense. And no, it doesn't. But for a lot of people, it's magic. It doesn't need to. Just like it's Star Wars technology does not need to make sense. It just needs to be there. And then lacking diversity, which, that's true. In both cases, that is a valid complaint that we're working on again in both cases. So hey, that's at least good to see. But at the end of the day, their cultural influence, their impact, and the way that they affect people is why I say that these two are so similar. Most of you've got archetypal heroes' journey plots. You've got strong and clear good versus evil conflicts. In both cases versus actual fascists, mostly based off of Nazis. Mm-hmm. That's. But I mean, if you want to compare superficial things, I prefer to compare that you have an original series, the original trilogy for Star Wars, and the books for Harry Potter. Then you get a lackluster, less impressive adaptation, the special editions, and the then the movie adaptations of Harry Potter.
The special editions did a lot of improving.
They did a lot of improving in some things and a lot of ruining things in other areas.
They're not well received. People don't like seeing what they love changed.
Like the end of, we were talking about this before.
And again, this is very superficial. I'm forcing this. Okay. Not even saying. This is just, if I'm going to be superficial, this is how I'd like to see people do it.
Ross is arguing or saying that the special edition is good. Chris is saying it's not.
I'm not saying it's bad.
No, but But I wanted to talk about it for just a minute. We were talking about this before we started recording this episode. That, like, the end of Return of the Jedi with the extended scene after the Ewok party and the extended music and stuff, I think that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's a fine addition. Great. You know, the extra scene with Han and Jabba in Episode 4 that was never in the original because they couldn't make it work. Yeah. I'm okay with that. It doesn't really change Han's character, very importantly, it doesn't change that. And it does let us know that, okay, Jabba's out there. Yeah, he's got something hanging over his head, so fine.
Well, and it shows us the pressure that's being put on Han.
But then you have Han shooting second, which is terrible.
Yes.
Which goes back and forth.
Changes Han's character, which is why I am having problems with it. You know, but like the extra shots in Bespin are beautiful. The extra shots of Tatooine are great. The added dewbacks do make it feel more realistic.
I don't like the forced CGI inserted into all of it. It is very glaring, and I don't like that.
Especially since that was like the very baby generation of CGI, and it shows.
This was before Phantom Menace even came out.
Yeah, so good and bad with it.
And I don't like, and especially because he's continued to adapt those as it goes on and on. Mm-hmm. I do not like Darth Vader shouting "No" when he grabs the Emperor and tosses him down.
That's another reason why I've been hesitant to buy a newer version, because I still have the old one where he doesn't do that, and I'm like, I don't want that moment ruined.
Yeah. I'm waiting for them to change it back in further editions.
I'm just waiting for Disney to release an original version. I'd really like them to just do that.
Or because it's on Blu-ray, you can have the option to put in what scenes you
want. Hey, that'd be great. Yeah. Disney, we know you're listening.
Come on, Bob.
No, I know they're listening. It's related to a property they own. They are watching us like hawks.
That's fair.
Ready to cease and desist at a moment's notice.
Right, that's true.
So, it's Disney. Nobody cease and desists like Disney.
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, so... But yeah, you got an original followed by a less impressive adaptation, and then followed in turn by a series of crappy prequel movies. Which I really wish that they'd learned from the Star Wars experience.
Which means Harry Potter, we can look forward to a crappy sequel series.
Could be a mixed bag.
There'll
probably be a series of movies that are really solid and then some really crappy standalones. But
no.
Wait a minute, weren't they talking about doing The Cursed Child as a movie too?
Oh, I hope not. I don't even
think so.
I haven't even read it.
I've heard that.
I don't need to, but
I don't know if it was just
and anyone who's been listening to us long enough here knows that I am not a fan of more of what I love. Generally speaking, I don't approve. It's just like, no, I love it. If you add more to it, you're never going to live up to it. It's only problematic. You all you get is prequel trilogies and all that sort of stuff. You just shouldn't.
Chris has such a hard time showing up to record our podcast.
Yeah, we got to stop doing this. Fortunately, I hate doing that. No, just kidding. but then again, in the long run, you get your Last Jedis that I absolutely love. But even then, I'm just kind of like, I'd rather not. I'd rather people just move on to new things. I personally, jumping back to Joe Rowling's excessive retconning disorder, I think that's part of what causes it, though, is the like George Lucas, he'd done a little bit of stuff, but Star Wars was his first big project, and it took off like nothing else. You can't follow up that kind of success. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how successful you are after that, it's all going to feel lackluster compared to what you had. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why you just kept returning to the well with Star Wars, is because nothing felt like Star Wars. Anytime he did anything Star Wars related, people were just screaming over it, just like, oh, there might be more Star Wars stuff. It's amazing. And I think it's kind of the same with Joe Rowling. She finished her absurdly popular series, like, especially and when you look at it too, it's like Star Wars did all of this with a big movie release. Joe did this with a couple of books. Like, these are the most well-selling series of books of all time, by a wide margin. These books may have outsold the Bible, I believe. As a collective, no individual one of these books have outsold the Bible, I think. But the Harry Potter series has actually outsold the Bible.
The Harry Potter series?
The Harry Potter series, yes. And that just tells you how popular the Harry Potter series, if that crappy is. But no, I mean, and to do that with a couple of... No one ever did that with books. No one has done that with books. Like, this thing... The Harry Potter alone put books on the map like nothing ever has. It's amazing. It's astounding. And she finished up those 7 books. She's got some movies coming out that she's helping with and everything that she retained a lot of creative control on to, and then she goes and she's like, okay, I'm going to write something that's not Harry Potter. She writes The Casual Vacancy, and it was okay. It was a huge bestseller because it came from her, but it wasn't critically lauded. It wasn't beloved by Harry Potter fans. It just sort of it was average success. And so then she decides to try and step away from her name, which was a good idea. So she writes the Robert Galbraith, The Cuckoo's Calling, I believe was what it was called. She has a trilogy of detective novels that she wrote under an assumed name, and it didn't take long before a critic was like, I know this prose. This is Joe Rowling. And she went, yeah, okay. But I just wanted to try not being me for a bit, which I think was a smart move. But again, those were successful. They did well on their own. Like, it was a nice chance for her to demonstrate that she actually knew what she was doing. She didn't have to rely on her name. And so I'm glad that worked for her. But again, normal success with those is not the same as what she had with Harry Potter. And I kind of feel like nothing could live up to that, I kind of wonder if it's just they returned to the well because nothing quite feels like that well. And so we just keep getting more little Harry Potter tidbits. She'd keep dropping more stuff in interviews that increasingly alienated a lot of the fans.
And to me, I have always read that as, I love the spotlight. I don't want it away from me for more than 5 minutes. So, I feel like I'm fading. Well, hey, let me tell you about this Harry Potter news that I have.
See, and I mean, I could see that, but I don't doubt that I wouldn't do much better, under that. Like, she wrote something that people adore.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really hard to just set that down.
People coming to her and asking.
And yeah, people are coming to her, and so she... But when they just come to her and she doesn't give them anything new, then they leave disappointed, and that's no fun for her.
Yeah.
I just kind of looked at that as just of course I'm going to keep doing this. I'm a writer. I like this. I love this. But nothing else she does feels like she's successful compared to Harry Potter.
Well, when you've set the bar that high.
Exactly. Like there's no way for her to live up to that. On the one hand, it feels absurd to feel bad for her because... first billionaire author in history. Like, she wrote something that is demonstrably more well-loved than anything that has ever been made in so many ways. But, man, you can't follow that up. There's no living up to that ever again, even with her own series. That's the thing, is when you keep returning to the well, it's like that Teddy Story joint where the Jerry Bruckheimer comes in for another Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and it's like, it gets more watered down with each one, right? I want a refill on this. Yeah, I don't care. That's what happens. You keep returning to the well, and it just keeps getting thinner and thinner. And I think that's why Fantastic Beasts movies are doing great. They're selling out. They're selling the house out, but they're not critically well received, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And a lot of really old time fans that have been around since early on in the series, like me and my sister, are just looking at them all going, why? Like, I don't want more of this at this point. I don't want you to keep abusing these things in a lot of ways. It's painful, It's and so I feel like I understand at least part of the psychology behind why she keeps coming back and keeps doing more of this, because it's what people want too. She's got people screaming constantly for more Harry Potter. Sure, everywhere she goes is people just like, oh, what about this? What about that? When do we get more? Can we have more? It's like the people like me, we're just sitting there going, no more. But we're not going up to her and saying, hey, please stop. And never would, because we're not complete assholes. But, so, she's getting all this feedback that, do more of this. We want more of this. This is what people want. And it's going to be a long time before she gets anything. She at least is not doing what George did with the prequels, where it's crashing so hard that you cannot avoid all the negative feedback. She's writing things that a lot of people still really love. And so I can't blame her for coming back. I don't want more of it. I kind of wish it would stop, but at the same time, I get it. At the end of the day, I am always perfectly capable of just taking my 7 books and going off somewhere else and reading them and being happy. And then when I run out of those and everyone else is like, oh, come read this, I'll go, no, I'm going to go watch Star Wars again. Thanks, I'm good. There's plenty for me to read out there. Plenty for me to write. But, when it comes to differences, I think there are some significant differences, too, that... George created Star Wars from the start to be a merchandised franchise. He kept those merchandising right. He had that in mind from very early stage. He allowed other people to play in his universe. He made this and then he went, hey, you want to play with this? It'll make me money, so go do it. and he'd play that very well. Jo has not done. She is currently retaining primary directing control of her franchise. Very little gets made by anyone but her. Even things like The Cursed Child that are primarily written by someone else, she's still giving way more focus and approval than George usually did on other side projects other people were producing. And so she's got much tighter control of things. So I think the point where we will see Harry Potter explode into full franchise mode the way that Star Wars has from the very beginning is still a ways off. I don't even know if it'll hit in her lifetime. Because it
certainly won't last past her lifetime. Or like this, it certainly will happen at least when she dies.
Yeah, it's tricky. Well,
whoever owns the franchise will be like, hey, let's merchandise the crap out of this.
Well, and it depends too. It's like I look at Tolkien's estate with Christopher Tolkien, his son, running things there. He constantly went back to re-releasing more stories, completing and finishing and sending out unfinished stories of his dad's for ages. And it's only recently that the Hollywood and everyone else really caught on to the idea that, holy cow, there's a pre-built franchise right here. Mm-hmm. If we grab onto Lord of the Rings and really turn that into a big thing. But part of that also was just Tolkien's family going, yeah, we're not looking for licensing all of that. Like we're not looking to sell our dead family members' corpse here for money.
I would.
And that's the thing. But so eventually it will undoubtedly reach the point where someone in the estate is like, yeah, it's okay. But at the same time, Jo's estate is worth so much that she could die, leave it all to her whoever inherits that. And they could probably live on that for quite a long time before before the money became good enough for them to really go, I do need them. Yeah. It depends on the people. It depends on how much they love the money, what they're trying to do with it. I mean, if they're trying to build a fleet of solid gold yachts, then they might need to merchandise.
I mean, that's what I'd be doing. So
naturally, no, you wouldn't. You would be building a Death Star.
Yeah, that is true.
Gold Death Star.
A gold Death Star. Ooh. But yeah, that is a significant difference.
See, it's already coming in his head.
Have fun with that in Minecraft. But yeah, George merchandised from the beginning. Jo is still retaining a tighter hold on that, and we probably won't see the explosion of other things being made until she lets go of those reins either herself or it gets passed on to someone else who will. And then the other thing that I note too is that Star Wars was made to be multi-generational. Like it was made for adults, but also to evoke their childhoods and to be interesting to children at the same time. Like we've discussed, is Star Wars for children? Yes. Is Star Wars for adults? Yes. It's for everyone. That's the whole point. Yeah. Harry Potter, Jo Rowling specifically stated she did not write it for a specific age range. She just wrote a story. And then it got marketed towards kids, which very much makes sense with a protagonist that age.
Really?
Yeah. That happens a lot.
Because feels like it was written for a younger audience.
Well, for the age group that Harry was at the time.
Yeah.
Most authors tend to that's how it tends to work. You tend to write towards the age of your protagonist, whether you realize that you're doing that or not. But she also always knew where that story was going to go. She knew it was going into darker realms, so it's a lighter. She kind of aged it up with the audience and with her protagonist as she went. That was always part of her plan. But yeah, it definitely, that's the thing, is she wrote it not necessarily with an age in mind, but it was a very clear middle grade novel. Middle grade to really young YA, which is where it lands right now, is young YA. And it did age up over the series. Like if you pick up books as 6 and 7, that does not come across as the same age range as the first one, because it wasn't. Right. But it was definitely aimed at children first, and happened to be picked up by a lot of adults and older teenagers who really liked it, despite it being aimed at a younger audience, because she wasn't necessarily writing directly at children. Like when someone's writing specifically for children, you can feel it. You could call that Jar Jarring. That's part of the reason we all like Jar Jar is because we dislike Jar Jar is because Jar Jar is explicitly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hold on, Chris. You don't like Jar Jar? What?
But that's the thing. Is, like, there are plenty of things that are aimed at children that we can pick up and go, "This is fun. Like, I really like this."
Yeah.
My Little Pony is awesome, guys. Like, it's really with the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. It is really well written.
I will confirm this, Ross. When you end up having little girls, you will.
I don't even have little girls. I've got little boys. We watch that.
This hurts.
This
hurts a lot.
It's really well made.
I'm not like a brony. I'm not going to like My Little Pony conventions or anything. But I have seen quite a lot of My Little Pony thanks to having now 3 girls.
Yep.
And it's a very well-written, clever show with lots of jokes for the adults.
Once you watch enough of it, you can see why there are bronies out there. Yeah. Because it's solid. It can capture you no matter your age, your gender, any of that. And that happens left and right. It's like you pick up Rugrats, you pick up a lot of the cartoons we used to watch as kids. SpongeBob was made for kids, but we could still enjoy that. Come on.
SpongeBob is awesome. The first few seasons, anyway.
Yeah.
Last
Some of us never did, and that's okay.
Ross.
Yeah, it's one of the few things that I'm not just kind of okay with. SpongeBob was just too much for me.
That's fair.
Even as a kid, it was just too over the top.
Ross had an unhappy childhood.
Apparently.
Anyway, Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
You know, those were all written aimed at children, but to be enjoyed by adults as well. And that's more how she was writing there, where it's like, yeah, she's writing a child, and so she's making it accessible to children, but she's also making it accessible to adult, and with mixed successes. And that's the difference between like something like My Little Pony and Jar Jar. Is the Jar Jar, I feel like, is explicitly aimed at children.
Yeah.
And it really shows, because there is no redeeming factor for adults to go, okay, that's childish, but...
And apparently he falls flat even with some children,
and
right, Chris?
Yes, and we'll get into that in a Nerf Nugget coming up. But yeah, and I think that's part of why Harry Potter falls more flat for you, Kyler. Because discussing Jar Jar, discussing Resistance in our last Nerf Nugget there, discussing Last Jedi, you continually have a problem with jokes, any of that you feel is too childish. That was your main problem with Kaz in Resistance that you're talking about, is how Jar Jar, how childish he was, that it was too childish. It stuck out. That's your problem with Jar Jar when we were discussing that. And that was your problem with, what was the other one I mentioned? I already blanked. Oh, with Last Jedi, with the porgs and with the humor that you felt was just too off base, too childish. And Harry Potter, especially at the beginning, very much was like, despite the fact that she's writing it for all age ranges, especially those early books, you pick those up, those are middle grade or YA books. Those are not made for adults. There is still a lot of accessibility for adults, which is why so many adults like them. But I would argue that compared to Star Wars, which started out as, we are deliberately making this for everyone, it very much was more, this is aimed at kids, even if it's accessible to everyone.
See, and I think that's the reason why I really attached to it at book 4, is because I feel like there's a jump between book 3 and 4 as far as maturity goes in the writing and in the story itself. I mean, it is just a little bit more gritty than anything before. And yes, they do that, but
yeah.
Once Cedric dies, they really grow the beard. But...
Yes, it's true.
No, that's actually not my biggest thing. I hadn't thought about that, and it may be true. And I
think it's part of it. I don't necessarily.
I haven't read the books since I finished it the summer before my senior year of high school, so long time ago. So it's not exactly like fresh on my mind.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put it past me. But one thing that has always stuck out to me, even as I was reading them, is that she, and this is where I come off saying that she's a cheap hack as a writer, is that I feel I don't like when writers, and this is why I don't like Superman, I don't like it when your hero encounters a problem and the writer gives them something, some new power that they've never had before that instantly and very conveniently solves the problem in front of them, rather than making them use the tools they have and actually overcome the challenge. I think it's just very cheap and lazy. And it seems like the climax of every Harry Potter book is like, well, Harry reaches deep down inside himself and finds the willpower to do this. Or, whatever. Like, it always seems like, oh, shoot, I've written Harry into a corner where his current skill set will not solve the problem. He's doomed. Okay, well, all of a sudden Harry can do this magic thing that he couldn't do before, and it solves the problem. Or somebody comes in and say, like, it's just like, it seems so very lazy that she's so worked up in telling a really cool story, and then it's like, oh, shoot, I'm about to lose my main character. Crap. Okay, Harry, you can cast a Patronus now. Woo! Okay, good.
I see, and the funny, I've laughed that you use that one again.
Because I know.
But I'm saying, I feel like that's the least of these. Like,
yes.
Book 1, it's, oh, hey, it turns out when I touch this guy, he melts. Like, he turns to ash.
Exactly.
That's never been brought up before. Book 2, it's like, oh, hey.
Has it brought up since?
Yeah, the book 2, it's like, oh, hey, look, this phoenix just conveniently dropped this hat into my lap, and I managed to pull a sword out of it. Hey, that's just there.
Yeah, you see what I mean?
And book 4 is just like, oh, hey, it turns out when Voldemort and I cast spells at each other, they just connect in a way that we've never really seen before. Like, no, that's definitely... And the casting the Patronus, that one makes sense to me. Like, he flat out says in the book that he's like, well, I knew I could do it because I'd already done it. Like, because of the time trending. Like, I know I could do it.
That was one that just sticks out of my mind because it's a very cool visual moment in the movies. You know? But anyway. But you're right, though. It seems like that happens at least once a book, and usually multiple times, where all of a sudden Harry can just do a thing that he could never do before, that sometimes isn't mentioned before, or again, after he conveniently saves himself from that. And I'm just like, that shows to me that you don't have your head in the game with this story. You're not...
The Harry Potter... It's a common complaint of the Harry Potter books that I like to look at it as the Harry Potter books are best read as individual books, because a lot of things get dropped from book to book.
Yeah, and another thing,
and
too...
you just have to understand that
that's
Deus
why
Ex
I was
Machina is going to happen.
when you said that, like, she'd planned the story from the beginning, and I'm going, really? Because her magic system certainly does not...
She planned the greater
the overall story.
But...
Okay, yeah. Because, like, the magic thing, I'm like, okay, first book, you've got carts pulled by invisible somethings, or maybe just magic driving them on their... All right, fine, cool. You're at a wizard school. Sure, I'll buy it. Oh, but they're really thestrals. Okay, cool. And then they only show up randomly, or the whole apparatus, like, we're going to travel by chimneys. Okay, cool. Oh, until we learn the much more convenient apparating, and then apparently the entire wizarding world is just going to do that now instead of traveling by chimneys.
There's a lot of explanation for why they don't do that in the books.
Oh, I don't remember it. I just remember being like, wait a minute, why hasn't anybody done this before? Wow, this is kind of dumb. Oh,
well, they start popping in just randomly.
Now, to be fair, I read 6 books in 2 weeks so I could make out with my hot girlfriend, but,
yeah. No,
my heart wasn't in it. But
there is a lot of, like I said, the magical rigor is not there.
And the other thing, too, and by way of explanation or probable explanation of my dislike for these books, is I was not reading the books for the right reasons.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
When you read a book, ideally it should be because you are interested in the book and you want to learn the book's story. Yeah. Right? That was not my motivation. My motivation was a beautiful woman named Tiandra.
I'm impressed she still made out with you after you disliked the book so much.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she wasn't happy, but I was like, a deal is a deal. I read the books. You didn't say I have to like them. Plus she was...
But I would also say that some of those complaints, it's just like, oh yeah, well, Luke's been told he needs to use the Force. He blocked a couple blaster bolts once, and then just at the end, it's like, turn off your computer and now you can shoot perfect. Where does that come from?
But the other thing is, at the time I was also reading these, I was also reading The Wheel of Time.
Oh, well, so was I. So
I know, but so for me, I was comparing these books directly to The Wheel of Time. And one of the things I love about The Wheel of Time is its magic system. Where it's like, these are the rules for the magic, and if you can't figure out a way to solve your problems within these rules, you are up a creek, my friend.
I would also point out that the ending of Eye of the World, though, is very much just, and then Ren just conveniently magics everything away.
It is. That
is actually a very common fantasy trope. Mm-hmm.
It is, but I really like the magic system where and we talked about this in another episode. I can't remember which one, but
probably is it science fiction or fantasy?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But like the guy who can do the gateways, and that's like the only thing he can do with his magic.
The Brandon character.
Yeah, where it's like, this guy. He's got magic, yes, but he sucks at literally everything. He can't light a match with magic, but he can make big fat gateways that are super sharp on the edges. And he says, well, what if I turn the gateway the other way around, right? What if I lay it horizontally? And it starts slicing through the baddies, and he wipes them out by the thousands. And I'm going, that is such a dang clever way to use the very, very, very limited skill set you have given this protagonist. That is awesome. Yeah. And I love seeing that. Whereas if it were Harry Potter, it would be like, all of a sudden this character... And I remember thinking this as I was because I had finished the Harry Potter books. Then I went and read the book that this story happens in. I don't remember which Wheel of Time it was. But I remember thinking, wow, if this had been Harry Potter, here's what would have happened. He would have been facing down the baddies. The despair would have been filled to the brim, just like it was. And then he would have, drawn deeper, had more faith, believed in himself a little bit harder than he ever had before, and then he would have been able to summon all the fireballs in the world and just incinerate them in a more traditional way.
You mean exactly like Rand did in the Stone of Tyr when the Trollocs got in?
Yeah, but he's supposed to do that. Right? He's literally the chosen...
Or say if this was Star Wars...
Literally the chosen one? Is that what you were about to say?
Yes.
Or if this was Star Wars, say, for example, Rand would have been just furious and angry and lashing out at his opponents, and falling to the dark side, and then the bad guys would have been like, "Mwaha, it worked," and he would have just conveniently gone, "Oh wait, no, never mind. I didn't fall somehow just by doing exactly what you said would cause me to fall. I just managed not to."
I don't know, but the magic system, the willy-nilly
It is not.
magic
It is
system,
definitely not a rigorous magic system.
It drives me nuts,
Yeah.
and that's also why I like Brandon Sanderson's like Mistborn series.
But that's exactly what appeals to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's like it's fun, it's magical, like it captures our imagination.
But I'm also
same as
weird
Star Wars
because I love Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and that is the most willy-nilly magic system in existence.
Well, and again, you like Star Wars, and that is the most willy-nilly magic system and technology system.
So I don't know why Harry Potter rubbed me the wrong. I really think it was the timing.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't have to hit everybody the right. Star Wars doesn't hit everybody the right way either. Like just because you like the one doesn't mean it'll catch the other one will catch you. But and I have plenty of problems with Harry Potter. Like I said before, we were talking about this before we started, and I was just like, just because we're talking about Harry Potter and I like Harry Potter doesn't mean I won't be mocking Harry Potter constantly because I love to mock Harry Potter.
I have to rebut Ross's The Chosen One. Were you about to say yes, I was. Randa, specifically The Chosen One, prophesied to do all those things. Harry Potter is but one of a couple of choices to be the Chosen One. As per J.K. Rowling in the books and all the fan theories and whatever. It could have been Neville, what's-his-face.
Right. But because of Voldemort's actions previous to the book, it became Harry's.
It still could have
literally
been Neville.
Which is why Neville also helped at the end.
That's right.
I don't know.
You didn't read that one. But
yeah, you're right. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, when it comes to Harry Potter, I love the books. I've talked a lot about it. I don't like the movies. Like when the movies started coming out, I was young enough and naive enough to still be really excited about people adapting things I love into things that are inevitably going to not be as good. And so I was really excited. Harry Potter and the first movie, the Sorcerer's Stone, which I
love it.
Harry
Potter and the first movie.
I loathe that they changed that to Sorcerer's Stone. They just did it because they were worried that it wouldn't sound magical to kids.
Kids wouldn't get Philosopher's Stone.
Well, not even that they wouldn't get it.
I don't want a philosophy class.
Yeah, not even that they wouldn't get, just that it wouldn't sound magical is really what it boils down to. I get that, but I hate it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. But yeah, that first movie, I went to watch that, and that is how I discovered that apparently the images I see in my mind's eye when I read a book are absolutely nothing like what anyone else sees.
Really? Not even Snape? Because I thought they nailed
not at all.
Snape.
Yeah.
There is nothing in that movie, next to nothing in that movie. That, like, everybody came out of that going, everything looked perfect, and I was like, no, it didn't. What are you talking about?
I'll give you a lot of things don't look the way, but I thought Snape was dead on.
I love Snape because it's Alan Rickman.
Alan Rickman,
Snape,
of course, is fantastic.
Alan Rickman can do no wrong, but no, not mainly because in the illustrations in the second book, in the chapter heading illustrations, there's a picture of Snape, and he doesn't look like that. He's a little more olive-skinned. He's got a goatee. Like he's massively different from that, and that's basically how I pictured him after that illustration. So when it was Alan Rickman, I was just like, what? Maggie Smith is McGonagall, like perfect actress for it, except that I never pictured McGonagall quite that advanced in years. Richard Harris is Dumbledore. I'm all right with that. Spot on.
Yeah.
More or less, but the main trio.
And let's also just add Maggie Smith to the list of actors that can do no wrong. She's fantastic.
Absolutely.
She's great.
Half the actors cast for Harry Potter, let's be fair. Like, it's basically a who's who of British actors, and they got some fantastic ones throughout the whole series.
Trelawney, Emma Thompson.
Emma Thompson, Kenneth Branagh in the second
Kenneth Branagh, I thought, maybe not on looks, but personality-wise, fetching nailed it on the head.
Absolutely.
For Gilderoy Lockhart.
What's his name that played Mad Eye?
Not to mention Kenneth Branagh is so naturally charming that you can't help but like him, and so then you put him in the role where they're just like, okay, we want you to crank your charm up to 12.
Yeah.
You know?
I can't believe I can't remember his name. Like him that played Mad Eye, but I still am a little weirded out every time I see David Tennant as Barty Crouch. That's a little weird to me. It's like, I love David Tennant in a lot of roles, but once Mad Eye turns back into Barty Crouch, it's David Tennant.
Barty Crouch Jr.
Yeah, Barty Crouch Jr. And that's
always
a little weird
movies.
To me. But. See, and that, those movies, I went and saw the first one, and I went, they left so much out. I was young enough that I didn't really understand that you have to do that with a movie. So I was just like, they left so much out, and nothing looked like I wanted. And then the second one, it was a bit more of that.
Yeah, people that complain about leaving it out, it's like, do you want a 7-hour movie?
Yeah,
because
some of them do, but hence the Lord of the Rings extended edition.
Yes.
But
they're so good.
It didn't get better as it went on. Like, Hagrid's hut was always the one that bothered me. In the first movie, it was just kind of outside the wall. But in the books, it always specified it was down the hill, which they eventually put it in down a hill.
Yeah.
And a ways from the school. But
yeah. But yeah, as the movies went on, they got better at adapting them into movie plots instead of just collections of events from the book. But they also got worse at them being in any way faithful to the book in ways that mattered significantly. Like, my number one problem with those movies, and the reason that I hate them, like, it's like I make fun of them and just like, yeah, they're mediocre, but I hate them. Despite, like, I will acknowledge that they're not as horrible as but I hate them for ruining my two favorite characters, and that's Ron and Hermione. And they just destroyed them in those movies. And I can vent about this for ages, but the main crux of it is just that they took everything good about Ron from the books and gave all his good qualities to Hermione and got rid of all of Hermione's bad qualities and either gave them to Ron or just got rid of them. And if you want to marry Sue, movie Hermione is made like David Yates that did the last 3 movies. He had such a disturbing old man crush on Hermione. And but it started from the very first movie. Like the very first movie, I always point to the Devil's Snare. So they've snuck past the dog and they jump down the trapdoor. They land on the Devil's Snare trying to get to the Philosopher's Stone. And so picture that scene in the movie. In the movie, they land on this and they're like, what is this? It's grabbing us. Oh crap. And Hermione goes, oh, this is Devil's Snare. You just need to hold still and it'll drop you through for some reason. And so she holds still and she sinks through and she yells at them from below and like, hey, you just need to do this. And Harry goes, oh, okay. Holds still and gets dropped through. But Ron is just freaking out too much and he can't get out. And so Hermione literally rolls her eyes, pulls her wand out, and casts a sunlight spell that causes it to retract, and he falls through. And that's that. It's like, why didn't you do that earlier if you could cast that? But in the books, that scene goes a little differently. They don't have to sink through it. It's just a soft landing pad there for them, and if you don't get off right away, it's going to grab you, which is what happens to Harry and Ron. Like, they land, and they're sitting there like, oh, we just avoided that dog. And then Hermione looks down and goes, oh crap, and gets off of there. And Harry and Ron are too slow and they get grabbed by it. And she's like, okay, relax or it'll grab you more. And they're like, okay, but what do we do to get it? She's like, it's Devil's Snare. It does this and this and this. And they're like, yeah. How do we get out, Hermione? She's like, I'm trying to remember. Because she's the one freaking out, not Ron. That's the taking her bad qualities and giving them to Ron. Mm-hmm. She's freaking out because in the books, she was actually a real character with real flaws and all of that instead of this perfect Mary Sue. And so she's freaking out, and then she goes, it hates light and heat. It hates light and heat. And Harry says, okay, make a fire. And she goes, I don't have any matches. And Ron goes, are you a freaking witch or not? And she goes, oh, right. Because at least early on, before she started growing up, Hermione was the one who panicked in serious situations. She had a really hard time dealing with those from the troll onward, over and over and over again, until she adjusted over time. She learned and grew, like a character should, but she's the one who started out with that. In the movies, she's just perfect the whole time. She lands on it and goes, oh, this is how to solve this. There we go, it's solved. You guys just need to do this, but Ron's freaking out too much, so she rolls her eyes and uses that wand. And I hate it. And that just keeps on going through the, you've got all these people complaining about, why was Ron even there? Why didn't Harry and Hermione end up together? Why did they even have Harry and Ron? Hermione could have done this all. And it's because the movies completely ruined their characters. They ruined her by making her too perfect instead of an actual character. And they ruined Ron by taking away everything that was good about him. In the books, Hermione's very intelligent. Like, she's got the high intelligence score. Her wisdom's a little more middling. It gets higher as she gets older. And her charisma's pretty low. She's not good with people. In the books, Ron's intelligence is not great, but not low. Like, he keeps up with Harry in their classes. His wisdom, in some ways, is a little higher. Like, he's more streetwise. Mm-hmm. He knows that he's good at staying calm. He's good at dealing with scary situations. And which is part of why Ron and Hermione are great complements for each other. She's got the smarts, he's got the street smarts and the calm and the charisma. Because when these books first came out, Ron was the favorite character. When in those first 3 books or so, everybody loved Ron, everybody hated Hermione. Which is why J.K. Rowling made a conscious push to try and make Hermione somewhat more likable, because she wanted people to like her characters, and to introduce a few more flaws to Ron to make him more realistic and not just this chillax, stay cool, whatever. And I feel like she got so much in that mindset that even she overshot it over the years, and that's how Ron got nerfed into this the second movie, you've got them going out to deal with the spiders, and Ron just spends the entire time going. And in the books, it's basically Ron going, I freaking hate spiders. Okay, let's go. Like, this is a guy who faces down literally his worst fear. Like, I always love in the third book when they're facing down the Boggart and his turns into this giant spider, and she specifically mentions that several members of the class screamed. Because, yeah, Ron's greatest fear is pretty freaking scary. But he dealt. And that's what I loved about him. You want to know what kind of character Ron is? Ron is a guy that, at the end of the third book, gets nabbed by this enormous dog that drags him under this tree that's trying to pulverize him, breaks his leg in the process. So he's just had his leg broken, dragged through this tunnel into the most haunted building in all of Britain. And then that enormous black dog turns into a wanted mass murderer who's been hunting down his best friend, and he's trapped in the most haunted building in all of Britain with this guy. And his friends come running through the door, and the first thing he says is, "Get out. Get out of here. He's after you. Get out." Because that is the kind of guy Ron Weasley was in the books. In the movies, they gave all of Ron's lines from that scene to Hermione. And Ron just sat there going, "Ah!" And I hate them for it. Because Ron was an awesome character. He was a flawed character. He was pretty racist in a lot of ways because he was raised in the wizarding world with a lot of their prejudices. He had a lot of problems. He had a hot temper. But he also got along well with most people, better than Hermione did. He was street smart. He knew what he was doing, and he was a brave guy. But all of that just got tossed out to give to Hermione, and it ruined both of their characters. When the series ended, you had, Jo did interviews where she talked about what happened to everybody. And Hermione became a lawyer. And she was a lawyer focused on rights for muggles and for various magical creatures. Bringing equality to the wizard world, which makes perfect sense because she was obsessed with that from the fourth book on. Mm-hmm. Like, that makes perfect sense. That was always mattered to her. In Cursed Child, she's Minister of Magic because it's Hermione, and Hermione is amazing and perfect, and how could she be anything less than president over all of magicdom? That's basically the logic there, is they just were like, well, maybe she was a lawyer for a while there, but really she should be Minister of Magic now, despite never showing any interest in politics and, whatever. Just because Hermione has to be perfect. And I dislike that. I dislike what they did to those. They're my favorite characters. And it's really frustrating to deal with all these people who barely read the books and don't even remember them because all of their memories of these characters have been eclipsed by the movies. And hear them talk about Ron and Hermione and just be like, and even hear Joe Rowling talk about Ron and Hermione and just be like, do you remember what you wrote?
Clearly she doesn't. I'm glad that's a perfect segue, actually. There was a funny thing that I saw on Twitter, because apparently, like, when they did the play or whatever, whatever the play
Cursed
was,
Child.
yeah. Hermione, the lady that was cast as Hermione, was black.
Joe specifically mentioned that she actually never mentioned Hermione's skin color, just that she was brunette. But
and that's what she said.
Oh yeah. And
then somebody was like, "Did you read your own book?" And they had like a picture of the printed book where it's like, Hermione, her white skin, blah, blah, blah.
Oh.
And they were like, so she is.
She does that a lot.
So, well, and that's also what, I don't know. I don't like J.K. Rowling's internet persona, I guess. It seems very attention-grabby. Because there are things like that where she's like, yeah, of course, no, she can be whatever color. Which, of course, in a play, you got to go with the actors that are the best. You can do that. I don't really care.
I was just reading an article about a play. Who was it? I'm sorry, you continue.
But that's what I'm saying is, like, I don't really care if the girl playing Hermione is black in the play, whatever. I don't care.
But to say that she was never
specified when you actually did very clearly, plainly specify the opposite of that. And I'm kind of like, well, don't just say things to say things and have the spotlight and, whatever. Like, have some integrity for your own story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and as someone writing it, it is really easy to lose a lot of.
I'm sure a
lot of your memory of those.
But it's one of your three main characters.
Yeah,
like,
that's
you've
fair.
got a picture in your head of what that character looks like.
Well, then, like, I have to assume that she probably has the original files on her computer somewhere. I think before I claimed that in public, I would probably go do a quick Control F through all those. And maybe
Hermione.
Maybe
but
see.
But also, it's like, this is one of your three mainest of main characters. You don't have an idea of what they look like in your own head when you came up with the character? You know what I mean? Like, as you're developing this character, you didn't have
It would
an
be one
image.
thing to just be like, sure, she can be black, that's fine. Which is fine.
Which is fine.
But
And
it is another thing to be
that's
like,
not
yeah.
my problem.
No, yeah.
The problem is when she's like, well, I never specified, so why are you getting angry if she's black? And it's like, well, you did specify.
Yeah.
So I could see if
angry,
somebody
but-
is like super obsessed with canon purity, that they would be like,
which a
the
lot of
character
people do.
is white, so any actress playing her needs to be white. Sure, although on a stage play, I am much more forgiving. I would much rather have a talented actor of any flavor to portray a character well than whatever. Like, for instance, there's it's like the 25th anniversary, whatever. Sometimes it's on PBS of Les Mis, and not Chauvelin. That's from Charlotte Pimpernel. Who's the
Javert?
Javert. There we go. Sorry, awesome musicals mixed up in my head.
Yeah, that
But
happens.
Javert, traditionally a white character because he's a French imperial officer, right? But he's black in this 25th anniversary Broadway blah 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 with Alfie Boe. I just know that name because my wife is in love with him. And he's amazing. His voice is rich and creamy and beautiful, and I love hearing him sing. He's fantastic. And he looks the part. He's got this chiseled jawline. He looks like an angry son of a gun who's going to mess you up. Exactly what Javert should look like. He just happens to be black, and I don't really care because it's a stage production. Even if the original character in the book is white, who cares? Because with a stage production, it's different acting on stage.
I wouldn't really care if they did it in a movie either. My main problem there is just the claiming that she never said it.
So anyway, and she does. Yeah, we talked about this earlier as well. A lot of the George Lucas retconning, of this or another thing too that I've seen her do is fans will be like, they'll theory craft and be like, well, this seems to fit with this, and then she'll be like, oh yeah, no, I totally planned that from the beginning. Did you though? Did you really? Or is it just convenient and you're adopting it? Which is fine if that's what you want to do, but you should then just be upfront and be like, you know what, I like that theory, let's adopt this into canon, rather than, oh yeah, no, I totally had that plan from the very get-go. Are you sure? Because reading her books doesn't make me think she had much planned from the get-go, other than maybe the main story arc.
Yeah.
But
yeah. No, I don't have anything more to add to that. Yeah. There are definitely some frustrations with it. I remember getting frustrated with George about that too, where it'd just be like, you just kind of toss things out there constantly, and you never really...
Thus we get a really confusing hierarchy of canon.
Yes. One of my other pet peeves with Harry Potter, with the fandom, is the way some people just idolize Severus Snape. Super creepy. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people on the internet talking these days about why that's inappropriate, so I don't really feel like I need to go into too much detail about what a horrible person Snape is. And it's like, I have no problem with him being a horrible person who occasionally managed to do the right thing for selfish or even unselfish reasons occasionally, but
he's still a terrible person.
I'm not thinking that this guy's getting much higher than Limbo in the afterlife. Like,
I've seen that a lot, though, like on Facebook, where they're like, things Harry Potter taught us, and they have a picture of Snape. It's like, to die for love or whatever. I'm like, whoa, only like the most selfish, self-serving form of love there, if you can even call it love. But anyway.
I ran across this on Facebook today. Things Snape did and no one remembers because the movie sucked him portraying him. A thread. This is by @softjilly on Twitter. Lara is the name here, or Yara. I'm not sure if that's an I or an L. Called Lily, his supposed best friend, a mudblood. Then tried to get away with it by saying he didn't mean it and that she, and only she, was different from the other Muggleborns.
That is like textbook abusive boyfriend relationship.
Saw his friends performing dark magic on Mary McDonald, Gryffindor girl in the same year as Lily, believed to be one of her friends, and when confronted by Lily, literally didn't see any problem with it and compared it with the Marauders' pranks. From the get-go, we see him dropping a tree branch on Petunia. That shows that he didn't see a problem in hurting the people Lily loved, seen later in a larger proportion. Attacked Remus in Prisoner of Azkaban while he was trying to explain things and said, I'm quoting, I'll drag the werewolf, perhaps the Dementors will have a kiss for him too. Continued to refuse to listen to Sirius when he was trying to explain things, even though he only tried to fight back once after Snape attacked Remus without magic. Threw a tantrum after he discovered he wasn't getting an Order of Merlin award, Title of Honor and Bravery, and wasn't going to get to see Remus and Sirius in jail, even though he knew they were innocent, and exposed Remus as a werewolf after the guy spent 14 years living in poverty for that reason. Found and ripped a photo of Lily, James, and Harry being happy and in love in half, and stole the half with Lily smiling, so he could pretend her happiness and love was directed at him and not at her husband and son. tried to get the Marauders expelled from Hogwarts time and time again while using dark magic and creating his own dark spells.
Oh,
Yeah.
snap.
Irony.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Abused his position as a teacher and head of house to reward extra points to Slytherin and take points from the other houses, way beyond the extent that was shown in the movies. Told Neville he would give his failed potion to his toad Trevor so that the fatal effects of the potion would teach him a lesson. Laughed and mocked Tonks when her Patronus changed when she fell in love with Remus, despite the fact that his own changed to match Lily's. Condoned and took part in bullying when Draco cursed Hermione's teeth to grow. He said he didn't see any difference, then watched as she ran off crying. After that, she permanently modified her teeth so they would be smaller. Bullied Neville to the point of becoming his greatest fear. Let's not forget that Neville's parents were tortured to point of insanity by Bellatrix, but Snape was his greatest fear. And if you could still argue that he had a terrible childhood life, it was inevitable that he's become a terrible person. Well, Sirius was raised and abused by blood supremacists, was disowned by his family, framed for murder, and literally lost almost everyone he ever loved, and still managed to be a decent person.
It's almost like your own choices, not your environment, determine who you are.
Neville was raised by a controlling and abusive grandma who constantly told him how worthless he was, lived knowing his parents were tortured to insanity, and was bullied and belittled by literally everyone, and still managed to be a decent person. Remus had no friends till he was 11, lived in constant fear that he was going to be outed as a werewolf, was forced to turn into a monster every month, lost everyone he loved, and lived in poverty for 14 years, and still managed to be a decent person. Luna watched her mother die, was picked on by everyone except Ginny, and was treated as a freak and only had one friend until she was 14, and still managed to be a decent person.
Yep.
I like Snape as a character, but the apologists who are all just romanticize him because he creepily stalked this girl for years, and then stepped in to try and keep her, not her husband and son, from being killed, and then continued after she died to just constantly mentally abuse her son because he looked like his father for years.
Snape's messed up.
Yeah, dude has problems. It's a pretty common trope. People want to apologize. They want to believe in redemption for bad people, which is great. Vader redeeming is great.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between, say, Draco Malfoy, who is a completely horrible person in some really childish ways, and then really gets faced with how horrible all the people around him are, and realizes he can't do that.
Yeah.
And pulls back from the edge and maybe isn't a horrible person, but still isn't a great person. And Snape, who really was just a horrible person, did one good thing his entire life for utterly selfish reasons, and never really made up for it in any way, continued to be a horrible person, and then died. I personally, I've been irritated ever since. I watched the end of the sixth book, when Snape killed Dumbledore. Spoilers. I was thrilled. I was just I just wanted the explanation to be that Dumbledore had been wrong about Snape the entire time. And then they gave this stupid thing about oh no, Dumbledore just planned it that way and he was going to die anyway. I never liked that. But I like them. I feel like they're pretty strongly that as far as being a phenomenon, as far as the effect they have on culture and the place that they've forged for themselves in culture, I feel like Star Wars is our most Harry Potter is our most Star Wars-y franchise out there.
Yeah.
And including the reasons people like and dislike them.
Ugh.
Chris, you disappointed me.
Oh yeah?
I had hoped to, in this episode, have you so thoroughly tear apart Kyler's grievances that he would be forced into being okay with Harry Potter.
Oh, if I couldn't do that with Last Jedi, I'm not doing that with Harry Potter.
I was just about to say the same thing.
But that's what I was hoping would happen here.
Sorry, man.
I am.
Yeah, if Chris couldn't do it with Last Jedi, which is a canon movie in a franchise I love, there's not a chance he can convince me that an entire franchise that I hate is worth it. I
have to just acknowledge that he's that hard-headed and obstinate, and he's not going to change.
Thank you. That's more what I wanted.
That's fair. I accept it. No,
there's plenty of flaws with Harry Potter.
And I also give Harry Potter a much harder time than I actually think. I don't mind Harry Potter. I hate on it just for the hype, and also because
it's hard.
It bothers people, and it's kind of fun.
That's the thing. It's hard when everybody else is loving on something that you're just but it's not that good. That quickly sours. So that's Like, I've been fighting against that with Rogue One for ages, where it's just like a good chunk of my vitriol for Rogue One is just the frustration of how? Like, why are you... The same thing that happened with James Cameron's Avatar. I'm just like, that movie is not good. Why was everyone so crazy about it?
It was so terrible.
We've got 4 sequels in the making. Why? It wasn't good.
So, anyway, Star Wars is my love, and if there's gonna be 2 franchises out there that are mostly the same, I'm definitely gonna just be monogamous with Star Wars. And all 8 of its movies.
Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8, 9, 10
main story. Yeah. Anyway,
plus that supremely wonderful Clone Wars movie. It's great.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't count it as a movie because it really is just the first 4 episodes of season 1 that they rolled into a movie because they wanted to make a bigger splash for this TV series.
Yeah.
So, and when I think of it that way, where I'm like, okay, this is just 4 episodes of the series.
That's fair.
That's fair.
Hey, but real quick, one thing I forgot I wanted to get across in this episode. If you're listening to this and you are a Harry Potter fan, I want you to look at what is happening with the Star Wars fandom right now and just brace yourself. Because that's one of the points of pointing out that these 2 franchises are so similar. And it's not just this. It's like if anything you're a fan of that has a huge fan base, just brace yourself because this is where it's heading. Yeah. The more you introduce, the more varied it gets, the more some people are going to be bothered and some people are going to be happy, and it's just going to get, it can get nasty.
Yep.
And yeah, just be ready because maybe Joe will keep that under wraps by really working on, like, really keeping control of the franchise herself. But even as it is right now, a lot of people not happy with what she's doing. You can't change things people love and expect them to be happy about it. It just doesn't work that way.
Yep. So they're only behind by 20 years or so.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and maybe even not even that much. I mean,
it
jumped into prequels a lot sooner.
Yeah, we didn't have a 20-year or whatever it was.
But on the other hand, we only have her producing new content. We don't have the entire machine behind. A lot of my grievances with other parts of Star Wars are just like, these books and this and that, and there's stuff all over the place that's just that. But if Harry Potter keeps it more constrained, then they might be able to.
My thought is we just need to mark the days until the Harry Potter special edition.
See, no, that's the thing. She's talked about it.
No!
She has talked about going back and doing a director's cut, quote unquote, of the first 2 Harry Potter books.
Oh, brother.
I know. It's and she's not like Orson Scott Card does similar things with Ender's Game. He's talked about going back and rewriting Ender's Game, which wasn't the book. It wasn't as popular at all as the franchises we've been discussing,
solid,
but it was very popular, and especially for
in the 90s, I remember.
And if you compare it to the rest of his books, it's easily his most successful book, as far as I know. And I kind of feel like it's that temptation to go back to the well with what people love.
If I remember it, it's also the one he likes the least.
He had a lot of problems with it, and he spent years trying to fix it to what it's supposed to be. But I'm just like, no, you don't fix things people like. Lucas has taught us that. He was trying to bring the originals closer in line with his original vision, which is exactly what Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko are talking about doing with this new live-action Last Airbender series for Netflix.
Oh, no.
It's not ever a good idea. If you want to make something new, Joe Rowling can keep spitting out Fantastic Beasts movies as long as she wants to, because I can ignore those. People won't get as upset over those when they can just go, oh well. The same way I go, Christopher Nolan made a great pair of Batman movies. It was beautiful. Too bad he couldn't close it off into a trilogy. Oh well. But
ouch.
Yeah. Michael, I say all that, but then again I'm like, it's too bad Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino never made like a sequel series to Avatar: The Last Airbender. That would have been great.
It would have been great.
It would have been. Too
bad.
They
could have had this really cool villain that like stole people's powers and was super interesting.
Oh, could have been.
Could have been.
Would have been. Oh well. But
could have gone on for several seasons and been a main protagonist.
But nevertheless, I can just, pretend that something like that didn't exist if it had been made, which it wasn't.
Yep.
And then,
Good thing, too, really.
Really it is. Yeah. But that's the thing, is when you remake something, especially the way Lucas has done it, where it's like, sorry, if you want these on the newest formats, you just have to take it. And that's nasty. Yeah. And the going back and changing, going back and changing things, it's like, I like to picture it as like there's a Venn diagram, and it is basically this massive circle of this is people who like this franchise, whatever it is. And then within that circle, you have tons of little tiny circles within that circle that are people who wish this was slightly different in this way. People who wish the same thing was slightly different, but in a different way. People who wish this was different, this was different, this was different. And a lot of those overlap here and there with people who want this change and this change, but not this change, while other people want this change. And they're all tiny portions of the whole. If you make a change, you will please 1, 2 of those tiny little circles, and everybody outside of that will either be meh or displeased with that. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what the change is. Doesn't matter how much you as the creator like it. Inevitably, if people liked it that much, changing it is going to cause them to be bothered and upset. Mm-hmm. So I really hope we don't get Joe's special edition of Harry Potter. We might. And if we do, I just fall into the meh
category because I'm like, I don't like Harry Potter enough to care one way or the other, so I wouldn't care.
But at the same time, it's like, I'm also not looking forward to the inevitable day when Disney remakes the original trilogy.
Don't even go there. No.
They're already phasing away from the original cast as much as they can. It's gonna happen.
I'm ignoring you.
Yep.
That is not happening.
Hopefully not. No. Phasing away from the original cast doesn't mean they're going to remake the originals.
Oh, they will eventually.
They will eventually.
No.
Not this generation.
I hope I don't.
That's the thing you got to remember, though. This generation? What do you mean by that? Because the generation that original trilogy originally greeted
is our parents.
Is our parents and older.
Yeah.
And the current generation that Disney's primary bread and butter, they are 2 generations removed from that. Quite likely that we, as the generation that came after the original Star Wars generation, will live to see those remakes as Disney starts trying to pay.
So I need to inculcate my children now not to accept it when it happens.
Or
sure.
What if they're amazing?
No.
Sure. In a universe where they are amazing, great. But given the likelihood of that,
in a perfect universe, they would not be made at all because they won't be amazing. There is no universe where they're amazing.
Oh gosh.
A lot of kids might really love them, but inevitably, people who already know the original won't. It's like book adaptations to movie adaptations. Like, the book is always better, right? No, there are movies out there that are genuinely better than the book. But here's the thing: I have a list of these, and I made a list one day where I was like, what movies do I know that are better than their books? Princess Bride is better than its book.
Yes, that's true. I've read The Princess Bride. Yeah, you're right.
There's a couple of those that I feel are these are superior to their books. Not a single one of them. There's not a single one of them where I read the book first and then watched the movie. In every single case, I watched the movie first, loved it, and then read the book and went, I think they did it better. I have never in my life encountered or encountered anyone else who could tell me that they read a book and then saw it adapted to something else and liked the adaptation wholesale, just liked it better. They might have a few things that they were like, I did think this was better in the movie adaptation. Not the whole movie as a whole, but there were elements. But I've never found anyone. And hey, listeners, if you've got one, I would love to find this. I've always wanted to find someone. Because I've asked a few people, and I've never found anyone who can do this. And that's the thing. If you love something, you love it. You might have some things you want to see changed.
The closest I can think of is The Count of Monte Cristo. So I saw the movie The Count of Monte Cristo when it came out, just after we graduated high school, like 2005, something like that. And I thought, dang, I knew that there was a book out there of it, but I'd never read it. And I'm like, wow, that was a really cool story, having watched the movie. I'm like, that was awesome. And then I went and read the book, and I said, wow, that was a really fantastic book. You know what is surprising to me? I am not finding the movie diminished by having read the book. Because again, The Count of Monte Cristo is not a small book. So if we were going to adapt it faithfully, it would have been like a 14-hour movie. Yep. But, so I'm like, okay, so understanding the limits of a book to a movie, you did really a pretty good job with The Count of Monte Cristo movie.
Yep.
It's not perfect, but you did really good. And I enjoyed the story that you told. You captured the heart and soul of the book.
But again, you watched the movie first.
Yeah, I watched the movie. But that's what I'm saying. That's the closest I can find where I didn't come away going, oh, well, geez, I don't want to watch the movie.
See, and I've got some where I'm like, where I like the movie better and I feel it is better. And there's a few where I'm like, no, this is demonstrably better.
Yeah.
Mostly in comics. Partly because a lot of comic storylines that get adapted into movies, especially if they're team-ups. You look at Avengers, like if you go pick up Avengers, the original Infinity Gauntlet story, it's hard to read. if you're not really well versed in your Marvel, because the whole point of those team ups was to shore up weaker characters. So you'd have this ever-changing roster where they'd be like, well, these characters aren't performing very well in sales. We'll stick them in Avengers with a couple. You'd have one or two really popular characters. Most of the rest would be this rotating cast of randos that they're trying to shore up. And so when you compare that to like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where they've built up all of these characters together, and it's not too much of a shifting cast, like the official membership of the Avengers in the MCU has shifted, but the cast of characters has not shifted drastically. So you're familiar with all these characters when you sit down and watch Infinity War, and it's amazing. When you go pick up Infinity Gauntlet, you will know next to no one. And you will not have much context for anything that's going on. Like, it does not hold up well. And these are, people talking about these are some of the definitive stories. X-Men Days of Future Past is one of these. I didn't even like that movie very much, but it's a lot. It holds up a lot better than the comic book does these days, just because of that distance in time and changing conventions of everything, of how they did those. But yeah, it's like, I feel those are demonstrably better. But again, I watched the movies first in both of those cases. Like, I don't have anything that I've ever found where I watched a movie adaptation or a television series adaptation and went, this is better than the original that I already like.
That's what I meant, by the way, of the closest I can find with Monte Cristo, is that they were both sort of on equal footing for me, rather than where you read the book and you're like, oh, the book is way better than the movie, or whatever. Like, that's the closest I can find to what you're looking for. Is
the one possible exception that I have found is Hunger Games, where I do know a lot of people who have said that they like the movies better than the books, and they did read the books first, but mainly that's because they didn't like the books as they went on, and the movies were able to bypass some of the book's weaknesses, namely that in book 3 of the Hunger Games.
I'm going to call Christina because she actually read the Hunger Games first and then saw the movies.
Actually,
so
I did as well.
Oh, so did I.
Oh.
I haven't watched all the movies, though. I only watched the first movie, and I did not think it was better than the book. But the problem, that I often see cited, that I cite for the problem with the third Hunger Games book, is that our main character is Katniss. We spend the entire time in her head, and she basically spends that entire book having PTSD, and that's about it. And so there's all these things happening, but they all happen off-screen without Katniss's involvement. And the movie was able to fix some of those by, actually showing them happen, because what else are you going to do in a movie? But yeah, that is the lone exception that I found. And even that is usually a qualified one, where they're like, I like some things that they did better in the movies. And I feel like they did make a stronger story, but not necessarily that they wholesale just like them better. But that is the one exception that I can kind of find, the closest to an exception I have. So, audience, if you have these, but please share them. I would love to hear about it, because I have looked for this for years and never found anyone who could give me anything solid. And if I am judging you because of what you like better than its original, I will not tell you at all, I promise. And so I'm always worried when I ask people for that, because I'm worried someone is going to come in and be like, oh, well, I mean, obviously this movie is better than this book, and I'm going to be sitting there like, get out. What is wrong with you? It's like, well, that's nice. Okay, I found someone who can tell me that, but it's someone whose opinion I obviously cannot trust. So, get out.
Oh, man.
Anyway, I'd love to see that. Harry Potter fans, brace yourselves. Star Wars fans, brace yourselves. It's only going to get rockier from here.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I think we've meandered somewhere.
Yeah, that's ending-ish.
Sure. I'm ready to be done. Let's
adequate ending.
It surely was. Oh, man. Anyway, yeah, let us know what you think, specifically with Chris's request there.
Yes, please.
You can find us on Twitter @MoreCivilized. And please, 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 don't let Lindsay and Stephen be alone in the Facebook group. I check every week to see if there are member requests, and there are never any. I know. A More Civilized podcast.
We're only
we would
a few
love
months
to.
old.
I know. Yeah. But get in there, dang it! You're missing out on Steven's awesome memes that he posts.
Yeah. We occasionally post memes too.
Yep, it's true. So there you
go. We do have a shout out again this week that we would like to shout out to. What's his last name? Ryan.
I don't know.
So on Twitter,
Ryan on Twitter.
Yeah,
Ryan, I'm sure you can find him with that.
Who is at Nearif212 or 2112? It's just a random assortment of letters. Sorry, Ryan. Okay,
you'll get to know Ryan better later.
Anyway, so he says, "I finished your latest episode. I don't have anything to add, but you said to let Chris know he was wrong. I decided that after
Which I cannot understate my appreciation of that.
Especially on this episode.
Oh, no kidding.
He says, I decided that after his defense of episode 8, he must be wrong about almost everything.
And they showed that to me, and I said, that's okay. I've still got more people telling me how right I am.
Yeah.
So.
I'm actually surprised that he was so on the other side of the fence after that episode. I feel like that's pretty...
That's fine. He and I can chat, because most arguments for why it's bad basically boil down to, but I didn't like what they did to those characters. And I'm like, I don't care if you liked it. It's still good writing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's okay. We can disagree. We're civilized.
We are, in fact, more civilized.
I, in fact, do not own a single blaster, so I must be very civilized.
That's true. And I own 4 lightsabers, so I'm like...
I do have a couple of lightsabers. Yeah. My sons have toothbrush lightsabers.
That's right.
I'm a little jealous of them.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, if there are any topics you would like us to cover, probably Star Wars related, but, every now and then we have these episodes where we kind of branch out there. If you can connect it to Star Wars in some way, let us know. Let us know what you want to hear about. And you can find Ross on Twitter.
Yeah. At Mr_R_Star. I totally missed somehow that you had done the Facebook, and for some reason I felt like I had just done the shout out of order, and so I was like, I've done the shout out before I should have. I'll wait for Kyler to do the website again, and then you started talking, and I was, it worked out. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, cool. If you want to know where to find us, just go find a different episode and listen to the end of that one. And in the meantime, thank you for listening to us, and may the Force be with you
always.
I'm Anna Graves, and thank you for listening to a more civilized podcast.